social media and among the political analysts who cover this race. You said this, quote, "When you are white, you don't know what it's like to be poor." Different communities interpreted that different ways. What did you mean by that?
No, what I meant, look, there is no candidate in this race who has talked more about poverty than I have. And one of the things that's disturbing, the media doesn't often cover that. We have 47 million people in this country living in poverty. That is a higher rate than any other country in the industrialized world. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. I talk about poverty all of the time. What I meant by that is that in African American communities, you have people who are living in desperation, often being abused by white police officers. That is a bad thing, and that has got to change, and that's why I'm fighting to reform a broken criminal justice system. But I know about white poverty. It exists in my state. It exists all over this country. In the richest country in the history of the world, we have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country. We have too many people living in poverty. We have got to change our national priorities. We have got to deal with that issue.
Senator,
that was a very simple statement.
You also seemed in the debate taken aback a bit by Secretary Clinton's attack on the auto bailout loan. There was fact checks done on this today, and they sided with you on those votes. Is this part of the problem running for president from the U.S. Senate, trying to explain cloture votes and complex?
That's a very good point, Brent. You know, as you know, votes are complicated, and sometimes within large pieces of legislation are good things, bad things. In this case, there was one vote to support the automotive industry. And I believe, of course I knew at the time, that if that industry went down, millions of jobs, not only in Michigan and Ohio, but all over this country would be impacted. Of course I voted in the one Senate vote that I had the opportunity to vote to support the automobile industry. What I did not vote for was the bailout of Wall Street.
So great that he had an opportunity to clarify that, because that was not clear in the last debate.
She did vote for that. What I proposed, and I lost by what they call a voice vote, is to ask the wealthiest people in this country to pay a surtax. They were the people, by and large, who benefited from the illegal behavior of Wall Street. And I thought that rather than have the middle class and working families of this country bail out Wall Street, I wanted the 1% to bail out Wall Street.
Senator, there is widespread bipartisan.
Well, everything about him is authentic.
That programs like Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid are the main drivers of our rapidly increasing national debt, now approaching $20 trillion, as you know. Without reforms of these programs, they say that we're heading for a debt crisis. You have the Congressional Budget Office, among others, projecting last year that spending on these programs and interest on the debt could consume all annual tax revenue by 2031, meaning we wouldn't have money for national defense and poverty programs and education and the like. You have a big tax increase planned, but you also plan to spend some $18 trillion on programs. So how do you prevent a debt crisis?
Okay. Number one, of that $18 trillion, much of it is being spent to have the United States join the rest of the industrialized world in guaranteeing health care to all people. And what that means is that, in fact, the average middle-class family, see, what that $18 trillion supposedly does not include is the fact that that middle-class family in the middle of the economy would save about $5,000 a year on their health care costs. That's part of our Medicare for All program. I happen to believe, and I know not everybody agrees with me, I believe that health care is a right of all people. I believe that there is something wrong when we are spending...
Where did that right come from, in your mind?
Being a human being. Being a human being.
And they've got real people in that crowd.
I believe that if she is poor,
they don't look like donors.
She is entitled to the same quality health care that you have because she's a human being. But in any case, when we talk about our healthcare system, this is important to know. It's not just that we have 29 million people without health insurance, that we have many more who are underinsured, and that we are getting ripped off big time by the pharmaceutical industry, who are charging us the highest prices in the world. But that we end up spending, and you can explain it to people, Shavy, why do we spend 3 times more than the British do per person for healthcare? Why do we spend 50% more than the French? And why do we pay the highest prices in the world for drugs?
But Senator, you're talking about healthcare there, but my question was about the federal debt. Currently, we're at $19.1 trillion.
Yeah.
The latest CBO baseline shows gross federal debt projected to rise by $10 trillion by the end of FY 2016, and the end of 2026, $29.3 trillion at the end of 2026.
But Brett, I raised the issue because of that 19 that you were talking about, 15 was healthcare. And if you exclude that, well, let's talk about the others. I happen to believe that in the year 2016, when we talk about public education, it means to me that a college degree today, in many respects, is what a high school degree was 50 years ago. So when we talk about public education, I believe that we've got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. I believe that we have to substantially lower student debt because young people should not be forced to pay off their debts for 50 years. Now, how do you pay for that? That's your question. You know, when the illegal behavior on Wall Street caused this country to collapse into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, the United States Congress, against my vote, Hillary Clinton and I disagree. She voted for it. I voted against it. But in any case, Congress passed a bailout. Well, you know what I think? I think right now we should impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. I think it's Wall Street's turn to help the middle class of this country pay for it. My point is, we pay for that.
Let me just, we'll finish up here and get to our questioners. One of the most interesting trends to emerge from the exit and entrance polls this year so far is which of you is honest and trustworthy. In state after state, for voters who value honest and trustworthy as the top priority, there's a massive gulf between you and Senator Clinton. Nevada, 82-12. New Hampshire, 92-6. Iowa, 83-10. In 5 of the Super Tuesday states, you had an advantage on this question. So do you share the concerns of your supporters that Secretary Clinton is not honest and trustworthy?
Well, I will let the people of the United States make that decision, but this is what I will say, which makes me very, very proud. As you know, on Super Tuesday, my own state of Vermont voted. And essentially, the people who know you the best are your own neighbors. And I've represented Vermont in Congress now for 25 years. I am very proud that I received 86% of the vote in my home state.
Let's go to our first questioner.
So they might be softer on Sanders than on Clinton because they'd like a longer race and they'd like to beat up Hillary Clinton more. So let's just keep it real. Fox has an agenda, and so they have.
I'm a first generation.
It is like possible that they'd want to be tough on Hillary,
as well as just as a person.
They also
horrified because that's where my father is from. Left unchecked, ISIS is going to perpetuate genocide on a number of religious minorities in that area, and I'm wondering how you, in your foreign or your military policy, will address that crisis.
Be confident, Bernie. Don't be afraid to be confident.
That ISIS is a barbaric organization that has to be destroyed. The question is, how do we do it most effectively? One of the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself is I voted against the war in Iraq. She voted for the war in Iraq. And in many ways, a lot of the turmoil and the instability that we're seeing right now resulted from that disastrous decision. The lesson that I have learned from the war in Iraq is that the United States cannot and should not do it alone. We've got to work in coalition. King Abdullah of Jordan, I think, made a very profound statement a couple of months ago, and he said, you know, what's going on there right now is a war for the soul of Islam. And the people who have got to most effectively deal with that issue are the Muslim nations themselves. They are the ones on the ground who are going to have to destroy ISIS. And I agree with that. I will do everything that I can to keep American troops out of perpetual warfare in the Middle East. But I do believe, along with a coalition of the major countries on earth, the United States, UK, France, Russia, I believe we should support the Muslim troops on the ground with air attacks, with military equipment, and with all of the help that we can provide. But it should not be our troops on the ground for many, many reasons.
Senator, if I could follow up, do you think what's happening to Christians in the Middle East should be classified as genocide?
Look, what's happening to Christians in the Middle East, in that area, is horrific. What is happening to Muslims is horrific. It is disgusting.
Such a great answer. Like, what are pricing this work for?
Yeah, why is that going to change anything? Having a debate about whether or not it's considered.
I mean, what can we say about these people? They are killing children because they are going to school. Girls who are going to school. They're putting girls in sexual slavery. This is barbarism. And together, in coalition, we've got to destroy ISIS.
Senator George Jackson is self-employed.
But they're killing us.
Sanders. I'll speak for the American public. You're much more honest than Hillary. Also a Trump supporter. My question to you is, you talked about the rich, and by taxing the rich to help our economy, wouldn't that hurt those rich business owners that help create jobs?
Well, George, good question. I disagree with you in this sense. We got to put into context what's happened in the last 30 years. And what's happened in the last 30 years, as you may know, and you can tell me if you disagree with me, but the facts are there has been a massive transfer of wealth from the working class and the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%. And right now we have seen a doubling of wealth owned by the top 1/10 of 1%. 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. You talk about corporations and job creation. Almost all of the major corporations in this country, you know what they've been doing in the last 30 years? You think they've been creating jobs in America? No, they've been creating jobs in China and Mexico. And one of the strong differences of opinion that Secretary Clinton and I have helped lead the opposition against every one of these terrible trade programs.
That's a great point. And they always say, oh, trust corporations create jobs. They're not creating
I don't believe American workers also should be forced to compete against desperate people around the world.
It's not the same thing as the wealth of a corporation or its ability to hire staff. It's not the same.
Change trade policies. Corporations are going to invest in America, not in China. But to answer your question, I do not believe in trickle-down economics. I do not believe that if you give tax breaks to the rich and large corporations, suddenly it's going to come down and help working families. What I do believe in
that.
is that we got to put more money into the hands of working families. How do you do that? You raise the minimum wage to a living wage.
Eyes glazed over. It's like you didn't use the case.
I was in Flint, Michigan, well, obviously last night, but on several other occasions. Our infrastructure, and it's not just Georgia, it's not just Flint, where kids are drinking poison water. It is all over this country, our roads and our bridges and our airports. Why is it that the wealthiest country in the history of the world, our infrastructure is collapsing? So I believe we should do away with tax loopholes. You can argue with me.
Can I buy a couple islands? God.
That you have major corporations making billions of dollars a year, stashing their profits in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, and you know what they end up paying in a given year? They don't pay a nickel in federal taxes. I think they should pay taxes. I think we use that money to rebuild our infrastructure. We create 15 million jobs.
You pay taxes, why should
over the next 10 years. So I think you and I have a difference.
All right, Senator. Next questioner is Dr. Swati.
Great answer.
Yeah.
She joins us. She is a physician. Doctor.
Hi, I wanted to ask you to articulate the benefits of your healthcare plan to the American people, and then explain the transition from the current system to what you envision.
Okay. I have believed my entire adult life, as I just said to Brett, that healthcare is a right of all people. Now, I know Secretary Clinton is suggesting that if we go from the Affordable Care Act where we are today, I'm going to dismantle the entire healthcare system. Children will lose the CHIP program. Elderly people will lose Medicare. That is absolutely, of course, total nonsense. But this is what I believe. Every other country on earth, as you may know, has a national health program of one kind or of another. And right now in America, we have 29 million people who have no health insurance at all. What I believe in is we have a program called Medicare, which needs improvement, but is a popular and important program for senior citizens. What I believe, simply stated, is that program should be expanded to all Americans. And when we do that, we make our healthcare system much more cost effective, because we end a whole lot of administration. If you are a physician, my guess is you spend half your life arguing with the insurance companies. Is that right? and you got people out there filling out forms. Every person in the room has private insurance, filling out forms. The reason that we are so much more expensive than other countries is that we have huge bureaucracy in the healthcare system, and we pay much, much too much for prescription drugs. So to answer your question, I believe that we move in a Medicare to a Medicare for all healthcare system, more cost effective, covers everybody.
Well, Doctor, let me just ask you, are you worried
too much for healthcare services? Doctors that overcharge for these services.
What-
And I know a lot of doctors are uncomfortable with these plans because they're worried about some oversight that would prevent that from
We're
happening.
going to change this. We're going to do this, but we've got a current system,
Right.
and I just don't see how you make the leap from where we are to where somebody else wants to be.
Well, that's what Secretary Clinton is trying to frighten people about. As somebody who has spent my entire life fighting for universal health care to cover everybody, I assure you that we're not going to leave anybody out. The point is to cover more people. One of the problems, Doctor, and you can disagree with me or not, we talk about 90% of Americans having insurance. That's a good thing. We made progress under the Affordable Care Act. I'm on the committee that helped write the Affordable Care Act. We have made some good progress. But, as you well know, we got millions of people in this country who may have health insurance, but they are underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments. Let me make a guess that there are people who walk into your office who are much sicker than they should have been because they didn't go into your office because they either have a high deductible or no insurance at all. That's pretty crazy stuff. I want every American to be able to walk into the doctor's office when they should. And I do not want to continue to see 1 out of 5 Americans not being able to afford the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe. I don't want to see elderly people cut their pills in half. And I don't want to see at the same time the 3 major drug companies in this country
How do you logistically transition over?
in profits.
Which is
While so many people cannot afford
not an easy question to
that's
answer.
what we're talking about.
And he talked in broader
Another
terms.
healthcare type question, Senator.
But one thing I wish he'd say is that when we passed Obamacare, they said we'd make it better. Well, my plan is to make it better.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're arguing against that.
Okay.
I thought they said that we were going to make it better. Nice, make it shinier.
I happen to believe, and let me be very clear about it, I know not everybody here will agree with me. I happen to believe that it is wrong for the government to be telling a woman what to do with her own body. I believe, and I understand there are honest people. I mean, I have a lot of friends, some supporters, some disagree. They hold a different point of view, and I respect that. But that is my view. And I'll tell you something which I don't like in this debate. There are a whole lot of people out there who tell me the government is terrible, government is awful, get government off our backs. My Republican friends want to cut Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid, education. But somehow on this issue, they want to tell every woman in America what she should do with her body.
Thank you for pointing out that hypocrisy. That's
Is
one.
that, there are some Democrats who say after 5 months, with the exception of the life of the mother or the health of the baby, that perhaps that's something to look at. You're saying no.
I am very strongly pro-choice. That is a decision to be made by the woman, her physician, and her family. That's my view.
Next questioner is Daniel Ball. He is a
medical
college
research.
student.
Let's say that in 2 years, they could say 4 months.
How
And then 5 years after that, 3 months.
enacting all of the legislative goals you propose without immense congressional involvement and support? In other words, are you solely relying on executive actions to push your legislative agenda?
No, I couldn't be doing that. That's unconstitutional and it can't happen. This is what I do believe. I believe, for example, and I look at you as a young man, that I want to see public colleges and universities tuition free. I want to create millions of jobs rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. I want to guarantee health care to all people. I want to make sure that women have pay equity on the job. And I want to do a lot of other things. So I will answer your question in 2 ways. First of all, I have worked with Republicans where there has been common ground for many, many years. A couple of years ago, I was the chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. I'm working with people like John McCain, Jeff Miller over in the House. He was chairman in the House Republican. We put together the most comprehensive veterans health care bill in the modern history of America. Okay, so number one, I can work with Republicans. But here is the second point, and I'm the only candidate who will tell you this, that at the end of the day, you've got a Congress today where too many members are worried about securing large campaign contributions from very, very wealthy people. In fact, one of the differences between Secretary Clinton and I, she has a super PAC, collected a whole lot of money from Wall Street. I've got 5 million individual contributions averaging $27 a piece. Now, I say that not to brag. Well, I'm bragging, but that what goes on in Washington now is Congress is not listening to you. Congress is not listening to the people in this room and the needs of ordinary people. Congress is listening to Wall Street, the multinational corporations, the large campaign contributors. And what I have said throughout this campaign, and I repeat tonight, no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. So to fundamentally answer your question, what we need are millions of people, many of whom have given up on the political process in disgust, many young people who have not been involved in the political process. We need them to come together and demand that we have a government in this country that represents all of us and not just wealthy campaign contributors. But
it's a great answer. We should also add what our Republicans are going to work with Hillary Clinton enthusiastically.
yes.
And you're dealing with, right now, a Republican Congress. So how do you convince that Republican Congress to do exactly opposite of what they believe?
In 2 ways. First thought, if I become president, it will mean that there will be a massive voter turnout. And that's what we're seeing just the other day in Maine, where I got 64% of the vote in the caucus broke their caucus record for turnout. In Kansas, broke their caucus record. If I win, it will mean that young people and working class people are coming out in large numbers. If that happens, the Republicans will not continue to control the United States Senate. They'll have a lot less seats in the House. But here is the point. If the American people begin to stand up and fight for their rights, for example, there's overwhelming support in this country, Brett, to raise the minimum wage. Republicans don't want to do it. But if Republicans look out and millions of people are engaged to say, you know what, you are going to raise the minimum wage or you're going to learn what unemployment is. You know what will happen? Minimum wage will go up. If women become mobilized and say, sorry, we are tired of working for 79 cents on the dollar compared to men, you better vote for pay equity. It will change. So my point is, change in this country.
Very close to that. Like, I don't blame him for mentioning it,
the women's
but
movement, the gay movement, whatever it is.
it's not the right way to achieve what he wants to
comes
achieve.
from the bottom on up. And that's what this campaign is about. Mobilizing millions of people to demand that Congress listen to them. Change happens.
Who's your favorite Republican?
I'll tell you something funny. I won't tell you. I have favorite Republicans, people I work with. If I tell you that person, it will be a disservice to that person.
I want to keep this answer a little tight because we're running up against time. This is retired college professor Richard Scott.
Richard?
Senator Sanders, welcome to Detroit.
He's such a birdie.
I wonder if you can elaborate for us the policies you support to help to rebuild and improve the infrastructures in cities like Detroit and Flint.
Absolutely. Look, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we should not be having a Flint, Michigan. That is beyond disgraceful. In my state of Vermont, we have bridges which are in desperate need of repair. Roads all over this country are falling apart. We have a rail system which at one point used to be the best in the world, no longer is. We have to, in my view, transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy so we can effectively combat climate change. What I have proposed is to expend $1 trillion over a 5-year period to make sure that states and cities throughout this country have the resources that they need to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. And by the way, $1 trillion may seem like a lot of money, but the American Society of Civil Engineers tells us that we need even more, but it would be a good start. And you know what happens when we invest $1 trillion in rebuilding our roads and bridges and water systems? and our educational system, so all of our kids get an education. We're going to create 13 million jobs over a 5-year period. That is what we've got to do, in my view.
Thank you very much. Last thing, very quickly, your senior aide said that you might be offered, if you weren't the nominee, the VP slot. Would you take it?
We're talking about running this campaign to win, to become president of the United States.
I hate it. I would hate it if they asked Hillary. I hate it when they ask Republicans. It's just such a senseless question. Will you preemptively give up right now? Yeah. No, I will not give up right now. You want me to tell you that's great? Yes, I'd like to be VP. Who would say that? Who in their right mind?
Well, I think I'd be lucky to get the spot. Oh, God, what have I done? Yeah, no. He's not going to say he wants to be the VP.
Okay. So, little break here in the action while they get ready to bring Hillary Clinton on. This is a quick town hall. I like it. Quickie quiz. What could be simpler?
It was good so far. I thought that Bear did a decent job. In terms of moderating in town halls and debates, so far I feel like this was one of the best cases.
Yeah,
weird.
Maybe he's just disinterested. Bear isn't Sean Hannity, like we've noted in the past, and he seemed fair, perhaps even on the easy side, the softball side to some extent.
Well, I have one conspiracy theory, and then one thing that I think they should do going forward. The conspiracy theory is that the Republicans hate and Fox News hates Hillary Clinton more. They think she's more likely to win. So they'd rather take it easier on Bernie Sanders and be harder on Hillary Clinton. We're about to find out because we just saw Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
We'll see if they're tougher on Hillary Clinton. She hasn't gotten yet, right, as we tell you this during our live coverage. The second thing is, I actually don't mind Fox News doing Democratic town halls, debates, etc., as long as the Republicans will submit to actual progressives asking them questions. Mm-hmm. Not like, oh, yeah, we'll go on MSNBC and Joe Scarborough asks her a question. Mm-hmm. That's not the same thing, right?
So then we get to moderate.
Yeah, if you have us moderating a Republican debate, I'll give you 2 Fox debates. Okay.
So I have a hypothesis on why they're being pretty easy on Bernie Sanders. And I could be wrong about this, but this is what I think. I think that Fox News has bought into the notion that Bernie Sanders is less electable than Hillary is. So they might have a vested interest to ensure that he wins the ticket as opposed to Hillary, right?
Yeah, that's really not a wild, crazy theory, because I saw Tucker Carlson and a bunch of and another person interview a pro-Bernie Sanders advocate a while back, and they let him get away with body blow after body blow on Republicans, conservatives, etc. And on Fox News, they'd have cut your mic about 13 minutes ago under normal circumstances, even though the interview was about 3.5 minutes. Okay, and I was like, oh, they're bringing on Bernie Sanders people to talk positively about Bernie Sanders. Gee, I wonder why, right? And so, look, if it's another news organization, I think it's fair to ask about, hey, what are the different interests of the management, corporations, advertisers, yada, yada. Sometimes that winds up having a macro effect. Sometimes it doesn't have any effect at all. At Fox News, it's not that subtle. They literally, and we've got insider info on this that has been proven over and over again, memos from management down to their news anchors that tell them what to do. The guy who runs Fox News, Roger Ailes, was a Republican operative for the rest of his life, including with Richard Nixon. No, they tell their anchors exactly what to do for the advantage of conservatives and Republicans. So anything they do is not an accident in that sense.
Yeah, and I would like to point out again, to go back to, we got accused of apples and oranges, but this was, what I saw so far, it was only half an hour, and it was what I would consider, maybe they only seemed like softball questions because he handled them so well, but 1 or 2 were fairly soft. But even this town hall from Fox, compare that to Anderson Cooper's town hall with Republican candidates. This half hour had more substantive questions about some topics that have never been brought up at a debate, including reproductive rights, than the entirety of 3 candidates going on for 2.5 hours at Anderson Cooper while he was asking them about their favorite flavor of ice cream and their favorite musical number.
So that's a great point there. Abortion hasn't been brought up in a Democratic debate yet, which is unconscionable. And it took Fox News to bring it up. I know that it's gotten a lot more attention in the last 24 hours as part of the reason that Fox News probably brought it up, but nonetheless, give them credit for bringing it up. And
I give them credit for bringing them up, and we're going to have a much lengthier discussion about this when we cover stories for our show. But I don't actually blame the moderators for not bringing it up, because I poured over both of their records on reproductive rights, and it's boring because they're exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right? So there's really no debate there. They're the same.
Yeah. So last thing before we get back to the debate, the question about the debt and the debt is terrible, wanting to do something about it is Republican framing. They did do that question to Bernie Sanders. There's no question about pina coladas, but they did have a super softball on the American people think you're way more honest than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
How do you respond? That's as softball as it gets. So let's keep it real. They did do that, and generally favorable towards Bernie Sanders. Now let's see how they handle Hillary Clinton.
News about Michael Bloomberg deciding not to make an independent run this year. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I have the greatest respect for Mike Bloomberg. We worked together during the 8 years I was in the Senate. He was elected, as you know, shortly after I joined, and he has to make his own decisions. But I look forward to continuing to work with him and finding ways that he can show leadership, which he has done so well over the years.
I want to ask you some questions that haven't come up in town halls or debates. One of them is about Libya. You were the leading voice in the Obama administration for the intervention, an intervention that obviously toppled Gaddafi's dictatorship using what you called smart power. And it's important to point out there were no U.S. casualties, minimal resources expended.
However, Libya now unbelievable shoulders. I think he works out 3 times a day, and only on shoulders.
ISIS had, quote, taken advantage of the political and security vacuum and is expanding to the west, east, and to the south, while Libya's financial resources are dwindling, the criminal networks, including human smuggling, are booming. If the intervention of Libya was one of your greatest foreign policy successes, is the post-intervention transition one of your greatest failures?
Well, Brett, let's talk about it in context, and let's remember what was going on at the time. It was during the so-called Arab Spring. People in Libya who had been living under the dictatorship of Gaddafi for 42 years were rising up. And he, as we can all remember, was a ruthless dictator with American blood on his hands. Ronald Reagan, as you recall, tried to take him out because of the danger he posed. And once it became clear to him that the people of Libya were trying to get more freedom and hopefully a better future, he basically said he was going to hunt them down like cockroaches. The Europeans, who had a lot more of a connection with Libya going back many decades, were absolutely intent upon working with us and NATO. For the first time, Arab countries stepped up and said, we will work with NATO because this man has paid for efforts to undermine us, assassinate our leaders, all around bad character. So we did join with our European and Arab partners. He was overthrown. And let's also remember that the Libyan people have voted twice in free and fair elections for moderate leaders trying to get themselves to a better future. Now, what has happened is deeply regrettable. There have been forces coming from the outside, internal squabbles that have led to the instability that has given terrorist groups, including ISIS, a foothold in some parts of Libya. I think it's fair to say, however, if there had not been that intervention to go after Gaddafi, we would be looking at something much more resembling Syria now than what we face in Libya.
Sure, but there are people who say Libya is now a failed state, and they are concerned about ISIS getting power. Would you put U.S. troops on the ground in Libya?
No.
To prevent ISIS from gaining a foothold?
Not U.S. combat troops. We already are, as you know from the headlines and the stories, using special forces, using airstrikes to go after ISIS leaders. But I want to just stress the point I was making. Leaving a dictator in place, like the Iranians and the Russians have done with Assad, where we have at least 250,000 people killed. Libya, the numbers are minuscule in comparison, about 1,500 last year. There is a concerted effort, the UN and others are really working hard to try to unify the different elements within the country. So it's been a couple of years. They haven't been as successful as their neighbor Tunisia, but they are attempting to move forward. We ought to be supporting them, not only with special forces and airstrikes against terrorists, but helping them secure their borders and deal with some of the
really
internal
like this answer,
challenges they
because
face.
Well, ask you about the question I asked Senator Sanders. Do you think a child should have any legal rights or protections before it's born? Or do you think that there should not be any restrictions on any abortions at any
She doesn't
stage
win any
in a
points
pregnancy?
for the Democratic
Well, again, let me put this in context because it's an important question. Right now, the Supreme Court is considering a decision that would shut down a lot of the options for women in Texas, and there have been other legislatures that have taken similar steps to try to restrict a woman's right to obtain an abortion. Under Roe v. Wade, which is rooted in the Constitution, women have this right to make this highly personal decision with their family, in accordance with their faith, with their doctor. It's not much of a right if it is totally limited and constrained. So I think we've got to continue. We've got to continue to stand up for a woman's right to make these decisions and to defend Planned Parenthood, which does an enormous amount of good work across our country.
Just know without any exceptions.
No, I have been on record in favor of a late pregnancy regulation that would have exceptions for the life and health of the mother. I object to the recent effort in Congress to pass a law saying after 20 weeks, no such exceptions, because although these are rare, Brett, they sometimes arise in the most complex, difficult medical situations.
Fetal malformities and
and threats to the woman's health. And so I think it is, under Roe v. Wade, it is appropriate to say.
She's parsing words. Like her position is fine. It's very similar, if not identical, to Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
But it seems like she's hemming and hawing when she should have a stronger answer.
Yes, I will talk about that in greater detail. There's a reason for that.
The private server and the personal emails during your time as secretary. But the FBI investigation is still hanging over your campaign, and there are Democrats who are worried about another shoe dropping, potentially with the word that there's immunity for your former IT staffer, Brian Pagliano. You were asked a question about it at the debate last night. You chose not to answer the email part, so I'd like to ask you just a few quick questions on this before we take audience questions on this specific policy. I've heard others say that neither you nor your lawyers have been apprised that you are a target of the investigation. Is that true?
Absolutely true.
Have you or your lawyers been apprised that any members of your current or former staff are targets of the investigation?
Absolutely not.
At the time you and your staff deleted nearly 32,000 emails, about half of the total volume, were you aware that the server was going to be sought as evidence by federal authorities?
No, but let me clarify this, because there's much misinformation going on around here, and let me just start with the basic facts. I have said it wasn't the best choice to use a personal email. It was a mistake. However, I am not alone in that. Many people in the government, past and current, have on occasion or as a practice done the same. Nothing I sent was marked classified or that I received was marked classified. And specifically with respect to your question, every government official, and this is a legal theory, not just a theory, it's a legal rule, gets to choose what is personal and what is official. What we turned over were more than 30,000 emails that I assumed were already in the government system, Brett, because they were sent to state.gov addresses.
Sure, but there were some that were just recently discovered and turned over.
No, that was in the State Department, not in me. Okay. I've turned over everything.
Let me just clarify. The State Department has redacted and declared 2,101 of your work emails classified, at least at the confidential level, 44 classified as secret, 22 classified as top secret. So you said at a March press conference in 2015, quote, I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. So can we say definitively that that statement's not accurate?
No, you can't. Here's what happens. The State Department has a process for determining what is or isn't classified. If they determine it is, they mark it as classified.
Well, who decides?
The State Department decides.
But what about you when you're typing an email?
No, the State Department decides what is, and let me go a step further here. I will reiterate, because it's a fact, nothing I sent or received was marked classified. Now, what happens when you ask or when you are asked to make information public is that it's reviewed and different agencies come in with their opinions. As you know, just recently, Colin Powell's emails were retroactively classified from more than 10 years ago.
Right.
As he said, that was an absurdity. I could not agree more.
So your contention now is the 2,101 emails contained information that should be classified at any time. They should be now or then. You're just saying it shouldn't have been classified.
Well, what I'm saying is it wasn't at the time. Now, let's take Mary Smith, who has some information in
You can tell how
the government.
frustrated she is.
And she is frustrated
Well, like a third of the entire
Give us your information, your memos, your emails, whatever it might have been. That then goes through a process. So even though the agency she works in has said none of this is classified, others start to have a chance to weigh in.
Sure.
So others might say, that wasn't at the time, but now with circumstances, we don't want to release it. So therefore, we have to classify it. I've asked, and I echo Colin Powell in this, release it. And once the American people see it, they will know how absurd this is. So Colin Powell and I are exactly on the same page.
We got a couple more kids, but you're absolutely right. Or John said they ate up a lot of her time with that. And I actually don't think that got to the heart of it. Actually,
Detroit.
Thank you.
which isn't about the classified stuff.
My question surrounds how do you anticipate getting anything done in Washington when compromise is a bad word?
This is one of the most important questions for everybody in Washington, not just the next president. I will tell you what I have done and what I intend to do. When I was First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State, I worked closely with Republicans, some of the most partisan Republicans. After we failed to get health care done back in 93, 94, I turned around and started working with Democrats and Republicans to pass the Children's Health Insurance Plan, which has 8 million kids insured. I also worked, because I care deeply about foster care and adoption, with one of the most partisan Republicans then in the Congress, Tom DeLay. But he cared about foster kids. I knew that. I called him up. I said, Congressman, would you work with me to reform the adoption and foster care system? He said, what do you want to do? I said, come to the White House. Let's have a meeting. We were able to find common ground on that issue. When I got to the Senate, I started working with people who had been some of the biggest critics and opponents of my husband's presidency. And we found common ground. I worked with, I think, nearly all, if not all, of the Republicans that I served with. And when I became Secretary of State, I did the same. Now, I'm not saying this is easy, but as my good friend Debbie Dingle knows, you have to work at it every single day. You have to get up, you have to try to find the relationships, you have to build on it, you have to find common ground. And that is what I will do. Now, the other thing I will say, which is a little bit kind of funny, is when I'm not running for something, the Republicans say really nice things about me. And I have like a whole archive of those comments because I did work with them, and I will work with them. I'll go anywhere to meet with anyone, anytime to find common ground. I will also stand my ground because I will disagree with some of the things that they want to do.
It is an incredible
family. I think your point is so important. Our founders created a system where they made clear no human being has all the answers. You have to work together. They had some really intense disagreements, but they kept working until they could come to some compromise. Compromise is not a dirty word. It is the way democracy has to work, and that's what I will do.
The compromise depends on what the compromise is. Compromise by itself is not necessarily a good thing. What are we compromising?
So many of them.
So some of them could be great,
the
some of them
women
could be
in the Senate became good friends, both Democrats and Republicans, and we worked on a lot of issues. Susan Collins from Maine, for example. But I also worked with John McCain. He and I joined together to raise money for the rehabilitation hospital in San Antonio for returning veterans. And we also joined with others to work on some important issues. So I have good relations with a lot of Republicans. I hesitate to mention any more names. It will probably hurt them, and I do want to work with them.
That's what Senator Sanders said. Let's go to
Joke is joke. Sorry.
recruiter for Wayne State University.
Hi, how are you, Mr.
Good evening, Secretary Clinton. Thank you for filling my question. Being an education policy PhD candidate, I really worry about the confluence of poverty and education and what that can yield in terms of crime. I know that in 1994 you supported the crime bill, and I would like to know what were your reasons for supporting it, and if hypothetically that bill were on the table today, would you still be in support?
Well, I think that's, as we said last night, both Senator Sanders and I supported it. I didn't have a vote, but I did support it. He voted for it. Why did we do that? Because there was a very serious crime challenge, even an epidemic in a lot of communities in our country at that time. So there were some positive things that were in the crime bill to try to deal with the threat of crime that really had so many serious consequences for people across our country. But as my husband said last summer at the NAACP, there were problems that were solved, but there were mistakes made in that bill. And one of them was, although it was just about the federal system, it set off a chain reaction where more and more people ended up being incarcerated who, in my opinion, should not have been. Low-level offenders, nonviolent offenders. We have to rip away the school-to-prison pipeline and replace it with a cradle-to-college pipeline. And in order to do that, we need a comprehensive approach. So, yes, we have to improve the criminal justice system. We have to divert people from jail and prison, but we also have to provide educational opportunities, particularly for disadvantaged kids from the earliest ages, which is why I support quality early childhood education, universal pre-kindergarten education. We have to work to reverse terrible situations like what you have right now in the Detroit public schools. And I know this is something the mayor cares deeply about. You've got little children in classrooms infested with mold and rodents. That is unacceptable. It is indefensible. I'm calling on the governor to return control of the Detroit public schools to the people of...
All right, back in stride, getting some applause lines on a tough question. She turns it to her advantage a little bit.
I want to finish with just one additional comment because you alluded to it. It is absolutely imperative that we make college affordable. I have a plan to do that. Debt-free tuition, more help for non-tuition costs so more young people can actually start college and complete college. And
she does not emphasize that nearly.
Okay, I'd be glad to tell you. Absolutely, because it's different from Senator Sanders. So let me, if I've got time, do I have time? Okay, this is exciting. Good. All right, here's what it is.
I know.
But again, we slightly
because everybody is going to have to do their part. I want debt-free tuition. You will never have to borrow money to attend a public college or university. The money that you will need will be provided if you cannot afford to go to college. And right now, given the cost, that covers most people except wealthy people. So what I am saying is that we will fund debt-free tuition. You won't have to borrow money. It's different from Senator Sanders in this regard. I think the costs are too high in college and university. Tuition has gone up 42% over the last 10 years.
Would make it free
I don't understand how that can be justified. So when Senator Sanders says free college with no pressure on the universities and colleges to lower their costs, I think that will only make it more expensive. So I'm requiring the colleges and universities to put their charges.
No, I think she's talking about the non-free
related to a young person getting a degree that will lead to a job. Don't charge the student. You will not be able to do that. Secondly, I expect states to start reinvesting in higher education. We have enough prisons. They don't need to be building more prisons. They need to be investing in colleges and universities. So they will do their part. And I have the funding worked out so that we're able to do this. Senator Sanders relies, in order to get to what he calls free education, on Republican as well as Democratic governors putting in $23 billion a year. Frankly, I'm skeptical of that. So I think we can get to where we need to get to, plus reduce student debt. Not only have you refinanced your student debt, but also make it possible for you to pay it back as a percentage of your income, which is what I got to do because I borrowed money to go to law school. And I wasn't stuck with the high interest rates that too many...
We want to take some... thank you, Secretary. We do want to take some other questions here. But, by the way, the question I asked Senator Sanders was, the concern about the national debt and how you pay for everything.
Well, my numbers add up. And my numbers are connected to sources of funding that we can count on. And people have looked at my plans and Senator Sanders. Mine costs about $100 billion a year. And that is all paid for because I think it would be a mistake to run up the national debt, to run up the size of government by 30, 40, 50% without knowing how we were going to pay for it.
Let me bring in
He knows how we're going to pay for it. Why are you lying about that? Come on, homegirl.
Okay, you're actually apparently not allowed. What you just said was sexist.
I don't give a shit. Call me sexist. Call me whatever you want. I know the differences in their policies, and I'm focused on that, not on stupid things like what are generated.
This year, he owed the federal government $141 because the tax break he got from the website was overestimated. What would you do to make health insurance more affordable for someone like him?
Well, first of all, we have to go at the mistakes that you just referenced that your son has experienced, and I've heard about those. I'm a big supporter and defender of the Affordable Care Act because I think it has given us the chance to do what I've worked for, what Senator Sanders believes in, to get to universal coverage. We're at 90% coverage. We have 10% to go. So I'm going to get the costs down. We're going to get out-of-pocket costs down. We're going to get deductibles down. We're going to require more free services within the benefit package, and we're going to go right after prescription drug costs. So all of that should help your son and everybody else. But here's something else I want to do. We need more competition in the healthcare marketplace. One of the ideas under the Affordable Care Act was to encourage nonprofits to get into providing health insurance. Blue Shield, Blue Cross used to be nonprofits. And they made a perfectly good, don't call it profit because they were nonprofit, but they made enough money to keep going and to pay their executives and everybody else who worked there. Then they all became for-profit. We need to get more companies, more nonprofits to fill this space. The ones that knew what they were doing have provided good services, but a lot of them have failed because they didn't have the right support. So I want more competition, and I want competition from nonprofits.
That's actually the most unrealistic
thing
I've ever heard.
We can really give the insurance companies a lot of pressure to get the costs down.
That didn't really help. At least she's starting to give some details as to what she was doing healthcare before it had been.
Also with young women. Why is Senator Sanders doing better?
Well, look, I think it's great that both of us are bringing a lot of people into the process. And I applaud Senator Sanders for really getting a very big turnout among young people. I love to see that. And I'm going to continue to attract young people. I'm proud of those who are supporting me. And I tell young people all the time, you may not be for me now, but I am for you regardless. And I'm going to keep working to try to help young people. Because after all, this election is about their future. And I would say about this is, I think a lot of young people, we heard an allusion.
Really?
The father talking about his son.
The multicolored stripe.
Yeah, a lot of young people are saying, what is going on? They get out of the Great Recession and into the job market, and there are no jobs. They're burdened with student debt, those that have gotten student debt. They're feeling the economy doesn't work for them, government doesn't work for them. I don't blame them for being, really disturbed by what's going on in our country. That's why I'm not over-promising. I'm telling you what I can do and how I think I can actually deliver results because I want to rebuild people's confidence in our country and where we're headed in the future.
Yes, I was about to say that. That's
Samuel is 13 years old. He's in middle school.
I'm not going to work too hard.
He is covering
I'm not going to try to change
this election very closely. Samuel.
Hi, Samuel.
Thank you.
Secretary Clinton, when you think of Senator Sanders, do you consider him an enemy or an ally?
Oh, an ally for sure. And here's how I think about it, Samuel. We have differences, and we are passionate about our positions and our differences. And, like we saw in the debate last night, we air those differences about issues.
Who's next?
Compare that to the Republicans and how they behave. And it's, I am very proud of the campaign that Senator Sanders and I are running. And I have said publicly, I will repeat that tonight, I hope to win the nomination. If I am so fortunate, I hope to work with him. Because the issues he's raised, the passion he has demonstrated, the people he has attracted are going to be very important in the general election, but equally following the election to try to get things done. So I certainly consider him an ally.
I can't wait till you serve this.
Oh, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Would you accept the
I don't want to think any further ahead than tomorrow and the Michigan primary. I can't do that. But I want to tell Samuel an experience that kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. Then Senator Obama and I ran a really tough campaign against each other to the very end. He won, I lost. So when I dropped out, I said I would support him, and I began to do that. I nominated him at the convention in Denver. I worked really hard to get him elected, and it wasn't easy to convince a lot of my supporters to immediately move to supporting then Senator Obama. But I made the case. I made the case in public. I made the case in private, and the vast majority did what I thought was the right thing to support him to be president.
This is a very good answer.
So
you should say it.
When you get through a primary, despite the emotions that are engendered in your supporters, you have to take stock of where you are and who is running on the other side and what that person represents. And I think if any of the remaining candidates on the Republican side is nominated, then I think my supporters, Senator Sanders supporters, we're going to find a lot of common cause to prevent that person from ever leaving the United States.
Secretary Clinton, thank you for your time.
Oh my gosh, it went by so fast.
It went by fast. Thank you very much for being here. We look forward to having you back on Fox.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Wow, look, I got to give Fox a lot of credit, man. They weren't playing. That shit was quick.
Yeah.
They said, if you were here at the beginning of the broadcast, I didn't believe them. There's no way it's going to be just an hour. Wrong again, Bob. It was an hour.
I would say
it was actually even a little less than an hour. It was like 15 minutes.
Yeah, they didn't start 20 minutes late like they normally do. If they were going to be 3 or 4 debates a week of that length, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, God, that was so refreshing.
I know
quick.
it was.
Oh, let's do a full show now.
In fact, there we go. All right, we do have some of our videos in. I was going to say they were so quick, I don't know if we're going to have the videos in time. Okay. Summary of the town hall that Fox News, drums, did with the Democrats. At first, Bernie Sanders agreed to this, so Hillary Clinton was like, no, I'm not going to go. Wait, it's a day before the Michigan voting, and Bernie Sanders is going to get an hour? Never mind, I'm coming. Give me half an hour of his hour. And so that's what went down today. I thought Fox News was softer on Bernie Sanders than Hillary Clinton for a number of reasons. One question he got was as soft as almost anything Anderson Cooper asked the Republicans, where they said you have a huge lead on honesty and trustworthiness against Hillary Clinton. How do you answer for the fact that you're super honest?
I think that's one way to look at it. The other way is to attempt to set a trap where he implies that she's untrustworthy. Which then a lot of people could be really pissed at him for. If he were to say, well, there's reasons people don't like her, that could have really hurt him.
That could have hurt him.
I know, but in the words of Bill O'Reilly, not buying it. It still frames it as, oh my, and they put up the numbers, like 92 to 6, like 89 to whatever, right? These giant leads for him in the area of honesty and trustworthiness. And then when they go over to Hillary Clinton, they batter her on Libya and emails, and not only are those tougher questions, but it doesn't allow her to get out any of her messaging to the Democratic primary voters, which she's desperate to do before an election. No. Not desperate because she's losing, but desperate because that's what any candidate would want to do, and they didn't give her that opportunity.
I really believe that Fox News doesn't believe that Bernie Sanders is an electable candidate. I think they would rather have him be the Democratic nominee, so a Republican will have an easier time getting elected, right? And so that's my theory behind why they were so easy on him. But at the same time, like for the answer that you gave, John, about maybe they framed the question that way so Bernie will attack her. At this point, I think everyone, including Fox News, knows that Bernie Sanders doesn't attack, right? He almost doesn't attack to a fault, right?
Definitely to a fault.
And so I think in some ways it's helped his campaign, in a lot of ways it's hurt his campaign, but he would never take the bait in a situation like that and attack her. So.
Yeah, he's unlikely to do that, even though he is trailing in some of the polls, and if he was ever going to do it, this would be the time. But when you get to the substance of their answers, Bernie Sanders wound up having a lot more applause lines, and he got to get his message out a little bit better. Hillary Clinton rallied near the end when she got back on her talking points, and I don't mean that in a derisive way. I mean, she was smart and said, hey, this is the message I want to get out, and got to do that. She even got a tougher question from the audience about the criminal justice reform, but she redirected that in a way that was well done in her case. So it was a short little town hall. They only got a half an hour apiece. I think Sanders got his message out a little bit better than she did. One of our viewers pointed out the same thing John did as we were watching it. Adam Jackson tweeted into us, Bernie Sanders goes first again. He must be the worst coin flip caller ever. Yeah, right? The one thing that was to Hillary Clinton's advantage was that, as almost all the time in these town halls, she got to go last. And so that sticks with you a little bit if you want.
And I believe we say almost always because we don't want to discount the possibility that maybe we're missing one, but I have never seen him go after her. And normally it probably doesn't matter because what you're supposed to do with town halls and with the forums is that the person is in a place where they can't hear or see, can't be apprised of what was said in the first portion. And I have no doubt that the vast majority of the time is the case. But there was one town hall, the round town hall, where they asked about they think of Chavez and that one, where she referred to something he had said in the previous part. And so in some cases it might be that she is getting a competitive advantage because she can respond directly to the things that he says.
It's also a competitive advantage to go last because people will remember that more.
That's true.
And so you get to rebut and you stick out in people's memories better. So, but again, in Iowa, she won. The first reporting was 6 out of 6 coin tosses. I saw a later report that 6 out of 8 coin tosses, which then led to a 0.2% win for her. So I guess she's lucky. So I assume they're doing it randomly, and certainly Fox News has no reason to favor her, and certainly their questions to favor her. So overall, not bad. You know, some people got some information out of it. They were both challenged a little bit, both by the questioners and Fox News. And at the end of the day, they got to make their case one more time before Michigan. Okay, now, so who won the debate? I'm going to go with Bernie Sanders, partly because of the framing of Fox News. Since Hillary Clinton ate up almost half of her time answering questions about Libya and emails, it's not her fault. It's Fox News doing that framing. None of them got applause lines because how could it, right? On emails, she's just batting away, these issues about the scandals. Fox News is so maddening because they ask about the nonsense stuff, like, the classified emails. But they were classified after she sent them. That's not fair, right? Whereas there actually is a legitimate part of the email problem, which is, hey, maybe we didn't see some of the emails where you talked about donations coming to the Clinton Fund, where you might have been doing favors for those same countries as Secretary of State. Why don't you ask that question? Part of the reason is Fox News loves corruption. So they actually don't want to really expose real corruption because then if you expose the corruption in the Republican Party, there'd be no end to it. So that part's nonsense. And then on Libya, I actually agree with her. I actually thought she gave a very good, thoughtful answer. But not a lot of Democrats agree with us. So that puts her at a disadvantage. I don't think she did a bad job of answering the questions overall. Because Bernie Sanders had an opportunity for more applause lines. He was a little bit more aggressive, not in challenging her, but saying, this is what I stand for, and I think that there was a lot of people nodding and clapping in the audience.
I think that his portion of the town hall came across as a candidate who's looking out for the people, right? He got to outline so many of his policies, whether it's healthcare, education, holding Wall Street accountable for their actions. He got so many applause lines because he was very clear about the fact that he's looking out for the middle class and the working class. I mean, it's the same thing that you see in other debates, but I feel like In this case, he was more concise, he was more aggressive with that message, he was more effective with that message. Hillary spent the vast majority of time defending herself. And look, I don't blame her for being frustrated over the email question, because at this point, I mean, who wouldn't be, right? I don't think there was any wrongdoing when the emails were retroactively classified. However, her answer came off very obvious in how frustrated she was. And I think that people are going to pay very close attention to her tone, and they're going to mistake that for a guilty person trying to defend herself, which I think is unfair to her, but that's just the reality of how people perceive things.
That's why framing is important. If you keep grilling someone, even if what you're saying is nonsense, it frames it as, well, why are you being so defensive? It's just because you're grilling me. Oh, see, you did it again. You're being defensive.
And then you just hear classified, not classified, was it classified, then classified, and she looks incredibly mad, which she should be, as he keeps peppering her with more questions in that section than in the rest of the town hall put together, and it makes you think of what you're supposed to think of. That's what he designed it for. It's like a person testifying in front of Congress, and she's answering those questions over and over, and so I think that probably hurt her through no fault of her own, simply because of the format. That was what it was designed. It seems to some extent like the entire point of this town hall was to give him a chance to kneecap her right there. I don't think that he did kneecap her, but I think that he tried. I think that aside from that, once she started talking with the audience, I think that she livened up and she delivered her talking points as well as she normally does, and people seemed to like them. I didn't find them persuasive, but people generally do. And I think that Bernie did a great job in the way that he normally does. So I would say that they performed similarly, but that probably counts as a win for Bernie because, again, I know it seems crazy because we've done 1,000 of these debates. There are a lot of people in Michigan and Mississippi and a lot of other states that haven't voted yet that haven't been watching these, and they have more to learn about Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. And so I think that he probably squeaked out a narrow win, although it's like an Iowa win or a Massachusetts win. It's only technically a win. They both got as many delegates.
Yeah.
So you're saying that she would have won the debate if Elizabeth Warren had endorsed?
Maybe. I'm saying he should drop out. Okay. Based on that debate, it was close, but he should drop out.
Okay.
I disagree with you. I think that this town hall, in a bubble, is an example of him making a big win. Or I just feel like he stood out a lot more than Hillary did as someone who has good ideas that are popular with the people, whereas she just came out as someone who is involved in so many bad things that she has to defend herself the entire time.
But we should make note of one positive framing that Fox News gave Hillary Clinton. They asked Bernie Sanders, would you accept being her VP? And then when it was her turn, they asked, would you have Bernie Sanders as your VP? Not would you be his VP? So that frames it as, well, Hillary Clinton's obviously going to win. So I think that's really what Fox News is thinking. We've got to ask Hillary the tougher questions because she's the one who's going to win this primary election.
They're Martin O'Malleying Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
So, honestly, why are you still in the race? Come on, buddy. Pack it in.
Right.
That's what they're doing.
But when she comes on, they're like, let's hit her hard.
Yeah. Would you like to hire Bernie Sanders, or is he unqualified to serve underneath you? That's basically what it's at.
Okay, let's get to the best line of the debate. We're going to go in this order. Video 2, then video 3, then video 1. I tell our director that doesn't mean anything. Okay, all right. So, best line of debate. Well, there's a couple candidates here. Let's have fun. Let's watch the first one.
I believe that healthcare is a right of all people. I believe that there is something wrong when we are spending...
Where did that right come from in your mind?
Being a human being. I believe that if she is poor and you are rich, she is entitled to the same quality healthcare that you have because she's a human being.
I love that line.
Yeah, okay, it's nice and simple, the winning line, and well delivered. Okay, let's go to the next.
It's almost as if we have rights to, liberty and the pursuit of happiness and one other thing. I don't know what. There's something, though. There's something.
I think I might have seen that in a document somewhere.
Property.
Yeah.
I think what was also effective about that line was how quick it came out of him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so why? Where does that come from? Because I'm a human being. I love that because it's authentic. It's who he is as a person, and it shows what his character is.
Yeah. And I like that he pointed to a Fox anchor and said, because you're rich and she's not, doesn't mean you should have better health care, right? Okay, next candidate.
If the American people begin to stand up and fight for their rights, for example, there's overwhelming support in this country, Brett, to raise the minimum wage. Republicans don't want to do it. But if Republicans look out and millions of people are engaged to say, you know what? You are going to raise the minimum wage, or you're going to learn what unemployment is. You know what will happen? Minimum wage will go up.
Damn, you see him throw that gauntlet down? If you don't raise the minimum wage, you Republican congressmen are going to find out what unemployment is. Damn, that's the people's elbow right there.
Yeah.
Okay. But I have one more candidate for best line. Listen.
In which you would be okay with abortion being illegal.
It's not a question of me being okay. Thank you for the question, but I happen to believe, and let me be very clear about it. I know not everybody here will agree with me. I happen to believe that it is wrong for the government to be telling a woman what to do with her own body. And I'll tell you something which I don't like in this debate. There are a whole lot of people out there who tell me the government is terrible, government is awful, get government off our backs. My Republican friends want to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education. But somehow on this issue, they want to tell every woman in America what she should do with her body.
I guess the genesis of the question is that, there are some Democrats who say after 5 months, with the exception of the life of the mother or the health of the baby, that perhaps that's something to look at. You're saying no.
I am very strongly pro-choice. That is a decision to be made by the woman, her physician, and her family. That's my view.
All right.
Yeah, that was my favorite. It's so past time for a Democrat to finally say, hey, you say you're for small government, but you want the government so large that they're going to make my personal health decisions for me. I can't imagine a bigger government. So God bless him for saying that. I've been waiting 40 years for somebody to say that, even though back then I was Republican. Anyway, still the line of the debate if you ask me.
I'm going to go for the first one. The other one is a great line, but I think to some extent it's going to sound like it's a prepared thing that he's said before, and he'll say again, and it's good. More people do need to say it. But by being a human is so quick, so instinctual almost that it reads as authentic. Like he wasn't. I'm going to be very honest with you right now. That's what he feels.
Yeah.
And also, this isn't necessarily an amazing example of it, but I want. Liberals need to make clear that they don't simply support a set of policy objectives, which happen, by the way, to be extremely popular amongst regular Americans. We have a fundamental value system that is coherent and that leads us to supporting those policies. And assuming or believing that people have an inherent right to live, to be well, to be mentally well, physically well, that is an important part of it. And I think that all too often we see the values language to conservatives and don't even make them articulate it. They simply get to say that they're the ones with values. We need to get out in front of it and show why a much more liberal, a much more empathic, a progressive value system is important. And I think that's the beginnings of showing that.
And then the issue of healthcare, John, you made a great point earlier. I mean, it doesn't get any more American values than the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And so here, in the case of health insurance, you have a right as a human being to your life, right? And so you don't have more of a right if you're richer. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't buy additional insurance above the minimum to get better health care, if you want the most advanced treatment for cancer, etc. We're never going to stop that, right? What we're saying is all citizens should have a right to life. You should get at least some coverage that's going to protect you if you get sick. That is a core American value.
Yeah, so I loved his last line. I loved all of his lines. And I loved the authenticity of his healthcare line and about him being a human. But the reason why I like the answer regarding abortion is because he tactfully found a way to call conservatives out on their hypocrisy without being offensive. And that's not an easy thing to do. That's something that I'm trying to learn myself, right? Because as soon as you aggressively come after someone for their hypocrisy, they shut down, they don't listen to your message. But I think that he successfully got that message across without offending people, without turning people off to him. So I think that was the best one in the debate.
People coming around as too aggressive on TYT? Well, I would
I know.
Has that happened before?
I have to mention something real quick. I got called out because on one day when I was particularly frustrated with Trump supporters, I went on Facebook and I just straight out called Trump supporters stupid, right? And someone emailed me and was like, look, you're one of the smartest people I know. I know that you're on the right side of things. But by calling people stupid or making them feel stupid, they're not going to listen to your message. They're not going to even be open to it. So you need to find more tactful ways to reach out to people and try to get them to understand why their positions aren't necessarily right.
You can't just call them stupid. You have to call, they're so stupid.
They're so fucking stupid.
Yeah. Don't you get it? Oh, you get it?
It's just hard. I am graduating, or one day will graduate from the media school of Cenk Uygur. And when you've been learning from Cenk Uygur for years, it's kind of difficult to be a little more coy about your opinion.
So it's my fault. That's what this started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you don't want Anna to be real anymore? Is that what you're saying?
I'm still gonna keep it real, but I think that it's important to be a little more tactful.
Okay, well, so let me say a couple things about that real quick, and then we'll do one last category here, and then take a break, and then do the rest of the show. I've got mixed feelings about me calling people stupid recently as well. Not Trump supporters. I don't have any mixed feelings about that. Okay, so I differ with you on that a little bit. But no, the people saying Bernie bro and stuff, they drive me nuts. And we're gonna talk about it later in the show too. They're back at it, and they have a whole bunch of new rules of things you can't say about Hillary Clinton. It's preposterous, and it's a dirty political trick. All that stuff is true. Me calling them stupid is borderline. So, probably a better way to handle it, but we get worked up on the show.
Yeah, I mean, your emotions get into it because we're invested on these issues, or in these issues. It's not just something we do for news. It's not something we talk about for fun. We care about it.
Right, so let me just give a shout out to Louis C.K., who did a brilliant job of addressing Trump supporters in a much more tactful way while still calling Trump Hitler. Yeah. Okay, if you read his whole memo that he sent out over the weekend, I mean, he was so like, hey, I don't know anything about politics. Yeah. What do I know? If you disagree with me, God bless, right? You don't even want to know my political opinions. I'm crazy, right? Yeah. He's like, but if you're a Republican, maybe like Kasich, something about budgets. Hitler, Trump, you see what he's doing here? Don't do that. Don't do that, right? Yeah, I mean, it was really funny. Yeah, he did. It was really funny. It was really smart. And while being enormously vitriolic towards Trump, was very understanding towards his supporters. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I like that we're taking tact lessons from Louis C.K.
Yeah. By the way, most people forget half Hispanic.
Louis C.K. is, yes.
So it might have taken a little bit of it might have had a problem with some of the things that Trump said to that.
Yeah. Let's call it what it is. Louis C.K., the whitest Mexican ever.
That is also true.
Yeah.
Okay. Also true. The only person in competition is Bart. But,
that's true.
Right? But his stepfather is Mexican, so I'm not sure that counts. Right. Okay. And then finally, George Takei with a great little message, too. I mean, it's impossible to summarize here, but check it out online where somebody asked Trump what 2 plus 2 is. Well, I'm having some of the smartest people look into this situation about the twos, okay? And we're going to look into it so well, it's going to make your head spin.
The thing is, I don't understand. I couldn't hear what he was asking me about the 2 plus 2. I had this bad earpiece, and I just...
It was the first time I was asked about arithmetic. By the way, this is a little bit embarrassing, but I absolutely love my mom. It was so accurate, the way he speaks, that she sent it to me because she thought he really said it.
Oh, the 2 plus 2?
Yeah. Oh, that's because it's exactly like something he would say.
Yeah, no. Nice job, George Takei, on that. All right, so final thing about the debate. I searched long and hard for a worse line here in my head as we were watching it. By the way, check out all of our live coverage on TYTnetwork.com/live. We're live every day at 6 p.m. Eastern, and we're live every day during the debates, the town halls, and the election nights. And I've got one here. There was no big gaffes. There's no big fails. Nothing we get to put a stamp on, go, on Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. I just didn't love this answer. This is video 4. Let's check it out.
How do you anticipate getting anything done in Washington when compromise is a bad word?
When I was First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State, I worked closely with Republicans, some of the most partisan Republicans. I'm not saying this is easy, but as my good friend Debbie Dingle knows, you have to work at it every single day. You have to get up, you have to try to find the relationships, you have to build on it, you have to find common ground. And that is what I will do. Now, the other thing I will say, which is a little bit kind of funny, is when I'm not running for something, the Republicans say really nice things about me, and I have like a whole archive of those comments. Because I did work with them, and I will work with them. I'll go anywhere to meet with anyone, anytime to find common ground. I will also stand my ground because I will disagree with some of the things that they want to do. Compromise is not a dirty word. It is the way democracy has to work, and that's what I will do.
Two reasons why I didn't love that. One, I don't think it plays that well with Democratic primary voters, where she's constantly talking about all the Republicans who love to work with her. I know the context in which she's saying it, and I know it will appeal to some people, and I know she's trying to distinguish herself from Bernie Sanders, who she's saying is too much of an ideological person who won't be able to get anything done. But still, it sounds like, oh, Republicans love me, man, and I will keep working with Republicans. That's the minor portion of why I didn't like that line. The major portion is the substance behind it. Because I know what Hillary Clinton compromised with Republicans on. Republican positions. So, if Republicans want a trade deal, Hillary Clinton agrees, right? Republicans want to bail out Wall Street, Hillary Clinton agrees. And the list goes on and on and on of things that she has compromised with Republicans where we got almost nothing back. Yeah. We just agreed to whatever the Republicans wanted. So whereas, for example, Bernie Sanders did compromise with Republicans on a couple of things, Veterans Affairs, they had a good compromise on. He got more funding for veterans. Relatively easier to do, but still it was a struggle, and he got that done. She said as the one thing where she got something for Democrats was working on foster kids. I mean, you want to talk about easy. What are they going to do? Like, no, we will crush the foster kids. Maybe they're Republicans, but a relatively easy victory. But something that was not an easy victory that Bernie Sanders got the Republicans to go significantly progressive on. I mean, it's also appeals to some people on the right wing, but a lot of the establishment Republicans fought it was auditing the Fed, and that was a significant accomplishment. And to be able to put together a real coalition on that, he should brag about that a lot more. So when I hear Hillary Clinton talking about compromise, what I hear is I'll go towards the Republicans a hell of a lot more than Bernie Sanders will.
Yeah, and look, now that I'm doing a lot more in-depth research on reproductive rights for Hillary versus Bernie, I'm noticing that they are the same in terms of their voting record. However, there's a big difference in the way that they've supported these issues and the way that they've talked about these issues. So Hillary will frame these issues in a way that will appeal to centrists, that will appeal to Republicans so she can close the gap between Democrats and Republicans when it comes to reproductive rights. Whereas Bernie is much more, these are reproductive rights. I want women to have them. I'm pro-choice. That's it, right? He cares a lot less about framing it in a way that will seem appealing to Republicans. Now, some people might say, well, that's a bad thing because we want both parties to work together. We want compromise. But as you know, during the Obama administration, whenever the issue of compromise comes up, the country moves even further to the right.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Just one more thing, John. To build off of what Anna is saying, when I read about the details of how they got the compromise on the Veterans Affairs issue, even the Republicans said, hey, listen, he would not move off this position. We had to go closer to him. And then at the end, he compromised. But I got to tell you, I think he got a pretty good deal for his side. Yeah. So that's exactly what you want to happen. You don't want to be obstinate, but at the same time, you don't want to do preemptive concessions because then that moves the bill further along to the right-wing side.
I can't say whether that bit from her will actually help her, but I don't think it's really a misstep. I think it goes in line with her strategy, and it's an attempt to appeal to a group that she needs to appeal to. So there's two ways. One is that she is trying to pitch herself as the progressive who gets stuff done. And so stressing your ability to compromise and previously work with people and they secretly actually like me definitely works or helps to pitch yourself as the person they're going to work with. And also, she is currently being beaten in the open primaries when independents and Republicans are allowed to vote. She loses those groups to Bernie Sanders. That's funny, of course, that he gets pitched as the ridiculous liberal that no one else would want to work with and beats her amongst independents, but he currently does, and she needs to do better. Michigan is an open primary, so there will be more independents than there are in closed primaries. And so it might be that that's an attempt to get some of those independents who aren't as hardcore Dems, who don't want a Dem who says she'll never work with anyone. It could be an attempt to appeal to that.
I hear you on all that, except It hasn't worked so far. Independents are going overwhelmingly to Bernie Sanders because they don't like to talk of compromise on establishment positions they don't like.
Right.
They like people who are saying, no, I'm going to stand up for the American people and not do what the establishment wants. So I understand the path she's trying to forge, but it hasn't worked yet, at least with independents. Okay, so that's our debate coverage. We come back, we've got a great number of stories for you, including things you're not allowed to say about Hillary Clinton, according to Hillary Clinton supporters. Okay, and it is a funny list. So you don't want to miss that. I also want to talk a little bit about tomorrow. Tomorrow's a super important election, which of course we'll also cover live here. It's Michigan. And so Bernie Sanders is trailing significantly in those polls, but I have a couple of reasons why it might not turn out that way. And so, also it might. So we'll talk about that too when we come back from the break. And as always, in all of this live coverage, I want to thank the members who make it possible. TYTnetwork.com/join to become a member and empower this. I mean, look, I'm going to pat ourselves in the back here, but really, did any other station have as substantive a coverage of their policy positions?
Probably not.
Or did CNN yell back and forth about is the KKK liberal or not, right?
No, even more importantly, we were able to both have the substantive discussion and also make our position on the ridiculousness of Debbie Dingle's name very clear.
Substance and nonsense.
Why not both?
Mixed up into one show.
Well, Dingle as a last name could be unfortunate. The only thing worse is if it's a middle name and your last name is Barry. See, why go there?
Or if your last name is Barry, but your maiden name was Dingle, so you decided to hyphenate, which I hate. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm. You see what I'm talking about? Substance. That's what I'm talking about. All right, we're going to have fun, and we're going to give you important policy on One Good Show when we return. So, Jodie Foster's directing a movie that's coming out, Money Monster. George Clooney's in it, Julia Roberts in it, Danny Huber's in it. What is this?
You're not really in it. You're not actually playing a role in it. You're just kind of like sticking around, aren't you?
What is this? Oh. This is not bullshit. This is not like the last Jodie Foster movie I was in.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
Like you're in the background, like.
I gotta tell you this, because on shoptyt.com, there's a shirt that's relevant to the story where I'm in the background in Contact with Matthew McConaughey in the foreground, and then it says Thug Life.
Really?
Yes.
I haven't seen that shirt. That's fucking awesome.
No, I'm one of the news guys that's amazed by what's happening. You know, you see that in the movies all the time, but normally they'd go to the CNN or MSNBC shows.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll do that in the movie as well, but they're going to come to TYT. Okay.
That's cool.
No, that's not cool. That's super cool. We're going to get drunk and go to that. Bart over there was like, he became like Buzz immediately. And then she's leaving. All right, see you later, Jody.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, okay. Are you Bart? Are you going to see her later?
I'm just doing what's right.
Yes, go back to
Mexico's going to pay for the wall.
It's so good.
Very, very big price.
We talk about TYT Army being so strong. Usually they help us run our show. Now they're going to help us run the country.
Like this. It's time that we reclaim democracy for the people.
We had a huge victory for Wolfpack.
When Lincoln said this is a country by, of, and for, he said of the people, not of corporations.
Our representatives don't represent us. Whoa! Democracy!
United!
We are!
We are!
Too strong! There's thousands of volunteers. You need to be among them.
With Wolfpack, the mission is so clear.
Money is killing our democracy. 96% of Americans want it. When you get the power back, oh, that feels good. This is just the beginning. Let's go get them, man. Up and at them. Knock, knock. We're coming for them! Wolf-pack.com.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong. Because you should be
angry. Young Turks.
If it was genuine, he was bad. Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches. 3, 2, 1, fade up. I just remember thinking, what is this guy's name? Cenk the Turk Uygur. I think a TV station there says. The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think. It's right out of like Wayne's World. This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power. We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America. We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view. We're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment. And Phil and host beat CNN and Headline News combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed it all less to shut up.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can support him. He says to me, you won't believe the meeting that I just had.
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
They want him off the air. Cenk took an incredible risk. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it? I wouldn't have done what he did.
And if I'm going to be a talk show host, I'm going to be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing an actual show. I guarantee it.
Right? And although that's an annoying tactic of they're immediately going to your talking point, here she would have been a little bit better served to do that given the questions that Fox News was asking her.
For the compromise?
So no, for example, on Libya, I would have given a much shorter answer. Even though her answer I thought was substantively great, I would have tried to pivot out of that as soon as I could.
Well, there were multiple follow-ups.
Yeah, and that's true, and so that made it harder. Oni and LeMay write in, definitely feel like Bernie taking his case to the Republicans and talking back against these talking points is so smart. Yeah, I mean, I thought he addressed, it was funny, they were both on Fox News, And oftentimes they seemed like they were speaking to a Republican crowd, even though that crowd was far more Democratic. They would say, "Look, we disagree sometimes, but I'm pro-choice," just because they were on Fox News. Smooth writes in, to be objective, their debates, referring to Fox News, have also been the best moderated this cycle. I agree with that. I really do, because they got to be a lot tougher on the Republicans than the other guys did. And so I think they asked much better questions on the Republicans, and then tonight was fine.
Yeah.
And then,
Let's keep it real. If Trump wasn't in the race, that probably wouldn't be the case. We can't say for sure, but I think that their desire to stick a dagger right in his heart lets them be a bit tougher than they would be otherwise.
Okay, and finally, writes in, see how much better Bernie is able to get his points across when someone isn't constantly speaking over him. Ooh, well, that's a topic in the show today, because Bernie got, as we suspected last night, into trouble for asking Hillary Clinton not to speak over him.
Listen, what you guys need to understand is men can't ever interrupt women, okay? But women can interrupt men as much as they want, because sexism.
Are you done?
Can we get a Chiron for Anna that just says Bernie, bro?
Okay, all right. So, without further ado, let's get started on the first hour. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There is one further ado. I knew I was forgetting something. So, tomorrow is the Michigan primary. Now,
as well as other states.
Yes, but Michigan is the most important one because it has more delegates, and it is not a southern state that is naturally an advantage for Hillary Clinton. It's not one of the caucus states that the media calls weird and hence in favor of Bernie Sanders. And so it could be it's important in and of itself because it's large and has a lot of delegates. It's also important for what might happen on March 15th going forward and how it affects the race. Right now, the polling is significantly in favor of Hillary Clinton. So there are some polls that have her with only an 11 or 13 point advantage, but by the way, that's a lot, right? There are some polls that have it at 30, so the average of the polls have her with a 20 point lead. Now, if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, walk off the ledge for a second. Not in that direction, this direction. Okay.
Too late. Walk away from the ledge.
Walk away from that. Thank you. That's the right way of saying it. So don't jump. Yeah, don't interrupt me. I'm a Bernie bro. Okay. I think that is this. They think we actually think that way. But anyway. So, now, two reasons why it might not go that way. John and I were talking about this on Saturday when we were covering Super Saturday. Bernie Sanders won 3 out of 4 states over the weekend, and of course, none of it counted.
Those were weird states.
They're weird states, or white states, or Bernie states. I mean, how do you escape from it's a pro-Bernie state, hence it doesn't count? Well, any state he wins, by definition, is a pro-Bernie state. How can they all not count? It's the most bizarre logic I've ever seen. Anyway, so John brought up the point that Kansas didn't have great polling, but the last poll that was done 2 weeks before Kansas actually voted had Hillary Clinton winning by 10. Now, we said it on the show during our live coverage before we got started. Hey, we don't really know who's going to win Kansas, Nebraska because of poor polling, but their caucuses, that might actually be in favor of Bernie Sanders. He's got better turnout because of the energy of the crowds, yada, yada. And it turns out he won Kansas, despite the fact she seemed to have a 10-point lead. You know how much he won by? You probably don't know because the rest of the media almost haven't covered it at all. You'd have to go to paragraph 17 to find out the differential, if they even put the differential in. He won Kansas by 35 points. Okay, now, Nate Silver, who's otherwise great with numbers, etc., had this comical thing that John pointed out in the live coverage, where he said, yeah, but in a state where there aren't very many liberals, the liberals that exist might be even more liberal. Now, that's a theory not supported by any evidence or any numbers. That's just made up. No, there's no evidence that Kansas liberals are more liberal. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that in red states, no, the Democrats tend to be a little bit more conservative, not liberal, right? Yeah. So historically, it doesn't have to be the case. So him winning by 35 points means that poll was off by 45 points. Now, I don't expect Michigan polling to be off by 45 points. There's a lot more polls in Michigan. It's a primary, not a caucus. But to say the polling has been great or exact in this primary season would be wholly fallacious. Yeah. It's just not true. The polling has been a lot less reliable than you would normally have. Like if you were having a general election, you'd have poll after poll leading up to the election for months and months, and then the average of those polls is so much more reliable than the polling we've had before these elections.
There have been a lot of Michigan ones. In the past couple of days, there have been a number. Now, they show a wide range of potential Hillary Clinton wins, but they have been showing that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's important at this point that Senator Sanders exit the race.
I mean, you don't want to actually have the vote. You never know what might happen. They're just, better say the story, quit right now. Yeah. Now, the other reason is that it's an open primary. So in closed primaries, only Democrats can vote. That is a substantial advantage to Hillary Clinton because independents overwhelmingly favor Bernie Sanders. In an open primary, independents can vote. In that case, well, your polling might be skewed because it depends on how you ask the polling question. Are you asking likely voters, registered voters, or all voters? When you ask all voters, Bernie Sanders does much better than if you ask likely Democratic voters, which is what most of the polling does and what it relies on. So that's why you've got two wild cards here, but keep it real, she does have what appears to be a wide lead going into Michigan. We just had a debate on a town hall in the last 2 days. I don't know if that will affect things, but so there is reason to believe that the outcome might not be as we suspect. But that's why we'll be here tomorrow. We'll be on pins and needles. We'll see how it goes.
What's the reasoning behind not allowing independents to vote in every primary?
I think that there's a decent reason. I hate it, but I understand it. They say, like, well, this is a Democratic primary. I don't want non-Democrats coming in here telling us who to vote for. I don't want conservatives coming in here, theoretically, telling us who us progressive Democrats should vote for. That's the theoretical reason. The reason I don't like it is because it favors the party and the establishment more, especially in this day and age. In the old days, independents might have been undecided or they might have actually been on the other side. In these days, it's the independents are basically saying, I'm sick of the party.
Yes, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so and a lot of those independents are, at this point, super liberal. They just can't stand the party establishment. Well, so to exclude them is totally unfair in this context.
Yes.
What's your prediction, though? For Michigan?
Yeah.
I have none.
I'm willing to go on record to say I predict she'll win Mississippi.
Ooh, very, very bold.
It's a no prediction. Okay, I predict Senator Sanders will drop out of the race. That's what they'll tell him to do. Regardless. I don't know. I mean, the polling looks pretty bad for him.
Yeah.
All the more reason if you're in Michigan to go out and vote then.
Yeah. And so, again, if the likely voters are usually older voters that have voted many times, and so if only they vote, then she will definitely win. If younger voters, people who haven't voted all the time, go out and vote, then he has a much better chance. That's why, by the way, Maine, too. We did our best guess. Me and Wes, we covered it yesterday. Wes said, like, that's what drives me crazy about the media. Before, no one said who's going to win Kansas, Maine, and Nebraska. They thought he had a better chance than Maine, and they thought he had a little bit better chance because Nebraska and Kansas were caucuses, but nobody was willing to say those are pro-Bernie states or he's likely to win. Not definitely going to win. No one even said he's likely to win, especially in Kansas and Nebraska. Afterwards, they turn around and go, oh, he was of course going to win those. Yeah, we knew that. Well, no, but you didn't know that. I watched your coverage. You didn't know that. You didn't say that.
He had a natural advantage because Kansas is a neighbor of Vermont. And they'll obviously go for.
So we did our best at guessing Maine, and Wes guessed that he would win by 10 points. Instead, he won by 29. Yeah, right.
Man, Wes is bad at this.
So just keep all that in mind. All right, let's get going.
Okay. Talk about the stories. The rewriting of American history continues with a right-wing felon soon to be released, Hillary's America. Here's a bit of the trailer.
Who are these Democrats?
High Judge Dinesh D'Souza was sentenced on Tuesday to spend 8 months in a confinement cell.
It all began when the Obama administration tried to shut me up.
No guarantee about still.
What did I learn? All crime is about stealing. The big criminals are still at large.
Didn't see any reason to keep them.
The system doesn't go after them because they run the system. It's time to go behind the curtain and discover the soul
Democratic Party.
Mickey Lashes.
The Democrats support slaves.
This civil rights act will allow colored men to sit at the same table beside the white guests.
Terminate all Democrats who are now pushing hard to clap
For the Democratic Party.
Why has all this been swept under the rug?
To cover the tracks of the Democratic Party.
And we're not even talking about ancient history.
The racism continued well into the 20th century.
That as long as the black man continues to ravage our white women, we will continue to lynch him.
What are these Democrats hiding?
This is about buying and selling influence by foreign oligarchs and foreign governments. When you follow the money, there are very, very few coincidences.
What if the goal of the Democratic Party is to steal the most valuable things the world has ever produced? What if their plan is to steal America?
That was awesome. I almost want to watch.
I was wondering if they would ever make a sequel to Idiocracy. Finally, they got around to it.
That was all over the place. Like, at first I'm like, oh, this is like a vanity project. He's trying to like change the narrative of what happened to him and why he was thrown in prison for 8 months. And then I'm like, oh, he wants to make it seem like Democrats are racist and only in favor of white people. And then he goes into like this weird thing about Hillary, like, being like the emperor of the United States. Like, where is this movie going? I have no idea.
Well, I do. Because this is what Dinesh does. This is, we're not allowed to call them Uncle Toms, I guess. We're, so, useful minority tools. UMTs. Okay, just say that. So, it's people who get paid by Republicans to smear Democrats, but it's really helpful if they're a minority. So Hannity will have his all-black panel that'll say, oh, it's all black culture's fault. Everything that goes wrong in Chicago, the inner city's all, where are the fathers? Where are the fathers? It's all black culture's fault.
Ajay Tantaros releases a book saying that feminism has bound women. They're basically in bondage now because of feminism.
Totally, yeah.
And Dinesh D'Souza is supposed to come out and attack Democrats for being vicious towards minorities. Right? Yeah, they can't have a. But no. It's like there was literally a memo written by one of the Republican donors who covered this in the 2012 election, saying we need a minority face to do these attacks against Obama. So they're like, they apparently even run out of black people. So they're like, Dinesh D'Souza, South Asian, good enough. They won't be able to tell the difference. Okay, so that's. I mean, have you seen a less telegenic person in the world? I mean, sorry,
Yeah.
Dinesh. It's not like I'm a good-looking guy, but
He's been hardened by his time in prison. Now he's
yeah.
I mean, we saw like real footage of him sitting there with an inmate watching Hillary Clinton give a speech. Like, that's what they do.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
And then he did a bunch of research, and he had a board with Whitewater and a bunch of post-it notes.
So there was that. Come to my camera for a second. There was that. My favorite part was at the end when he has that look like. Okay, so and then I love the inmates that they did in those recreations of his time in prison. He probably went to one of those white collar prisons where they play tennis all day. Meanwhile, everybody in there is like buff and largely minority. Some white guys. There's a guy going like this and talking to him like this while Hillary Clinton's on the TV. Yeah. And this is their view of the world.
I know, it's incredible. Okay, but I want to talk about a little bit of substance, even though it's kind of hard to do so with a trailer like that. Like, okay, this whole notion that Democrats, we're the same Democrats from the days of slavery, and we want slavery now. And it was the Democrats that lost their shit after Beyonce did her Formation performance at the Super Bowl, right? It was Democrats. It's Democrats that respond to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter to belittle what the black community is doing or going through in this country, right? It was the Democrats that respond to unarmed black kids being shot and killed with, oh, he was probably a thug. It's the Democrats, right? It's the liberals in this country that do that. Well, get out of here with that. Like, that makes me so angry to try to paint this picture of the Democratic Party as the racist, when in reality, it's Republicans that like to frame minorities as moochers and everything that's wrong with society.
It was a Democratic governor who said there are a bunch of black drug dealers coming in to sleep with our white girls. Oh, sorry, that was Paul LePage, Republican governor. He
literally said that, by the way.
Oh, and he clarified later that he meant.
Yeah, he said drug dealers, and they said, "You mean black drug dealers?" And he said, "No." And then later, a couple of weeks later, in a I think on a radio show, he's like, "Yeah, no, I meant black drug dealers sleeping with our poor white girls. They shouldn't do that."
Yeah, and you tie that in. You try to set the historical precedent for it by doing the same exact thing that guy. Remember, there was a guy the last week who said the KKK was a leftist organization advancing progressive principles, which was so ridiculous that he was run out of media permanently. He had to run to hide on CNN doing election night coverage for them after saying that the KKK was a leftist organization. As if they don't know what a political realignment is. As if they don't know that it was conservatives that made up the Democratic Party in the South at that time. As if they don't know that the civil rights movement that he portrays so heavily in that video was specifically the thing that led to the last conservative whites in the South going over to the Republican Party. As if he doesn't know all of this.
So let me give one more fact here, and then I want to ask you guys, even if you're a Republican, how you can stomach that party. Okay, so Ken Melman was the head of the Republican National Committee. He was their chairman. He came out in 2005, and he literally apologized for the Southern strategy. If you don't know what the Southern strategy is, so when Republicans decided, hey, you know what, the Democrats are the more conservative party in the South, we'd like to get their votes. And the best way to do that is by appealing to racial division, right? So we'd like to polarize the racists more in the South and get the racists to vote for us. Okay, that was their Southern strategy, and it worked great. They did. They got all the racists in the South to switch from Democrat to Republican. So when Republicans were the party of Lincoln, Lincoln was the liberal candidate. Okay, now then the party switched because of the Southern strategy. Now, if you don't want to take my word for it, that's why I brought up Ken Melman. He was the head of the Republican Party, and this is what he said. In 2005, some Republicans gave up on winning the African American vote, looking the other way or trying to benefit politically from racial polarization. I am here today as the Republican chairman to tell you we were wrong. And he went on to say, it's not healthy for the country for our political parties to be so racially polarized. Just as Democrats came to this black community in 1964 with something real to offer, today we Republicans have something that should cause you to take another look at the party of Lincoln. So there he is, acknowledging in 2005, as he's talking to the NAACP, yeah, we screwed you. We went for racial polarization. We appealed to those guys and went in that ugly direction. Democrats have something real to offer. That's the head of the Republicans saying it. Now we'd like to make amends, and then they decided, nah, never mind. And they didn't go in that direction. But there is a clear admission to what everyone in politics knows, which is that the Republican Party is now the conservative party and the same conservatives who are for segregation and slavery and all those things. See, liberals by definition want change. Conservatives almost by definition want the establishment, tradition, authority to remain the same. We had slavery. That's why part of the reason why they wanted to keep slavery, and progressives wanted to progress and get equal rights for blacks, Latinos, women, gays, etc. Yeah. I mean, if you can't understand that, then you don't understand anything about politics. And then finally, that's why I'm asking you guys, even if you're a Republican out there, given that movie, the entire premise of that movie is a gigantic lie. Even if you're a Republican, you believe in lower taxes and more bombing in the Middle East, whatever you believe in, you know that they're lying, right? In that movie, the whole point is propaganda. We're going to scare you about Hillary Clinton. We're going to lie to you about the true history of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. We're going to try to trick you because we think you're stupid, and we'd like to, have you as a useful idiot and a sucker. Doesn't that offend you? Doesn't that bother you? Just because you want lower taxes doesn't mean you have to be a liar, right? It doesn't mean that you have to do these kind of tricks. But they think that's what works for us because we don't have a great platform, so we got to lie to people to try to get them on our side. Yeah.
he needs to lie to people to get them to watch the movie. I mean, you saw the trailer. Did that have anything to do with Hillary Clinton? No, it's just attacking the Democrats. And by the way, it doesn't come out until July. There's some chance, even if it's a small chance, she won't even be the nominee at that point. That would be hilarious for his ticket sales.
Yeah. So,
Which I anticipate will be low anyway.
yeah. And no, but they don't expect a lot of people to watch this. And you think Dinesh D'Souza made this on his own and hoping for good ticket sales? No, a Republican donor funds movies like this. They did one on Obama, and they're now doing one on Hillary Clinton. That's all Dinesh D'Souza has left in his pathetic, sad little career.
Well, no.
So he came out as a so-called intellectual, but he's been so discredited, so embarrassed. And then, he violated campaign finance laws and had to spend 8 months in jail. He's a felon. He's a known crook and a liar.
That's why we need people to go see this movie. You've got to buy the tickets, give him some money that he can then illegally give to someone in this election and go back to jail. He's too broke to be a criminal right now. Yeah. Every crime is about stealing.
Yes.
Sometimes it's about giving. Look at your record.
That's exactly right.
The police have it.
Further annoy Dinesh D'Souza's donors and waste their money by having Bernie Sanders win the primary. They're like, oh, God damn all that money. Okay, now we're going to do it now.
Bernie's America.
Bernie's America.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's jump to something a little bit scarier. Donald Trump's new thing at his rallies is to get his supporters to vow with their hands in the air that they're going to support him no matter what happens between now and the time to vote. Now, that's a little bit weird, but it would be almost understandable until you actually see this ceremony going on. You're going to see that in this video.
You can go out and you can vote early. So go and do it. Go vote. Okay, wait. Let's do a pledge. Everybody here, who likes me in this room? Okay. I've never done this before. Can I have a pledge? A swearing? Raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I, no matter how I feel, no matter what the conditions, if there's hurricanes or whatever, that's good enough, will vote on or before the 12th for Donald J. Trump for president. Thank you. Now I know. Don't forget, you all raised your hand. You swore bad things happen if you don't live up to what you just did.
Crap, you almost went 10 minutes without threatening someone. Couldn't quite squeak in there.
Before we get to the serious stuff, who puts whatever in a pledge?
Or whatever.
If hurricanes or whatever happens.
Yeah. By the way, you guys probably didn't notice. Maybe we could go just to a still shot. There's a guy behind him to the left, two over. Not the dog. Oh, the one in the white.
Yeah.
So he's wearing a clothing. You'll see once they zoom out. Maybe you can jump ahead. He's wearing, his hat says Trump's wall. He's made to look like the wall. You see him right there?
Yeah.
Mexico will pay is written on his check. I think he means pay financially, but I'm not entirely sure. There's some chance it's a revenge thing.
Yeah.
So, as you're having people put their arms out forward like that, to have someone in the crowd also having a shirt that says Mexico will pay, is not the best way to go. But for Trump, it is. This is his bread and butter.
And look, there are some people in the audience that are doing. Look, everybody, raise your hands. This is me raising my hand. There's some people who immediately snap to attention and thrust their hand out. They've been to meetings like this before, I think.
Look, I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and defend that crowd. I do not respect Trump supporters, right? But I believe in being fair to them. A lot of people are comparing this to a Nazi salute. I think that's unfair. I don't think that was his intention. I don't even think it really looks that way, to be honest. I think there's a bunch of people raising their hand like you would normally raise your hand.
You're being too nice.
Maybe I'm being too nice.
Look, when this first came out, I laughed at them because it's funny, and then I thought, okay, we're going a little bit too far.
Yeah.
And look, and Trump supporters have tweeted out photos showing the rallies of other candidates who have their hands up in the air. Bernie Sanders, all of his rallies look like that, but they're actually holding up smartphones because they can't just watch things; they have to record it because millennials have problems. But so that seems totally fair. But there was a lot of media coverage of this.
Yeah.
And everybody was saying, hey, this makes us a little bit uncomfortable the way this looks. We even had Abraham Foxman, the former director of the Anti-Defamation League, saying, as a Jew who survived the Holocaust, to see an audience of thousands of people raising their hands in what looks like the Heil Hitler salute is about as offensive, obnoxious, and disgusting as anything I thought I would ever witness in the United States of America. We've seen this sort of thing at rallies of neo-Nazis. We've seen it at rallies of white supremacists. But to see it at a rally for a legitimate candidate for the presidency of the United States is outrageous. Now, at this point, you might still say, okay, they're being too serious about this. But Trump heard that criticism, and so a day goes by, and what does he do at his rally? You'll see that in this video.
Well, let me ask you most importantly, who's going to win North Carolina? Right? I think we're going to do great here. I think we're going to do great. Should we do the pledge? Should we do the pledge? Raise your hand. I swear I'm going to vote for Donald Trump next week. I swear. Right? Good. Oh, wow. Just with the people here, I think we win, right?
So look, you can say that, and look, I think you're being totally fair, and I felt the same exact way. But he hears that criticism, including from people who had family who died in the Holocaust, saying, how about we not have this imagery if possible, considering all the other stuff you've been saying and doing? And he turns around and says, F you, we're doing it again.
Okay, so it was a day later. Are we sure he heard the criticism?
I think there is no time when he is not on Twitter.
No, that's true, and Abe Foxman is very well known. The Anti-Defamation League is not a small organization, right? And they do some great work over there. And by the way, obviously they're against anti-Semitism. They're also some of the first to speak out against vitriolic statements against Muslims.
Yeah.
Right. So they do some wonderful work there. And so it's unlikely that he didn't hear. But more than that is the context. And I'm actually going to agree with both of you. How? I don't think the crowd knows it. I think Anna's right about that. But when he says raise your hands, I don't think they're thinking, yes, I get to do the Hitler salute.
Yeah, I want to be clear, I was joking earlier about that.
Yeah. But I think I want to dispel the notion that Donald Trump doesn't know what he's doing, because I think he knows exactly what he's doing. So he does this all the time. He dips his toe in and then takes him back out, right?
Yeah.
So, David Duke, I don't know, I never heard of him. Okay, fine, I heard of him, I denounced him. The Klan, I didn't hear you. Okay, fine, I denounced them, right? And you can literally get about almost a dozen examples of that in this campaign. If you see that strategy enough times, you go, I get it. He wants that headline. He wants everybody who's interested in that direction to go for him. And then so that he can appear legitimate, the next time he just comes back and backpedals from it, right? And his voters to say they're low information voters is giving them too much credit, okay? So they don't see his hypocrisy. They just don't see it, right? So here, when he does it again, I think that's him dipping his toe again, right? I think his voters, those guys in the rally don't know, but Trump knows. So that he sees this headline, he thinks, not a bad headline, let me do it one more day, and watch. Now going forward, he'll step away from it.
Yeah.
He'll say, that's ridiculous, of course not, we're just doing a pledge, we're having fun.
One thing that Trump has definitely banked on during this campaign is the free advertising that he's gotten. And he's gotten that free advertising by doing controversial things. So is it possible that he knew what he was doing and he knew that the media would cover this story, he would continue getting that free coverage? Absolutely. And you're right. He will switch positions, change ideas within a second, and no one calls him out on it. Nobody really holds him accountable for that, and he gets away with it. So it might be a strategy by him. Maybe he does know what he's doing. But I certainly don't think that his supporters knew what was going on. I don't think that they were, taking part in that strategy. At least they were, unwittingly doing what they were doing. And I feel like it's an unfair criticism of their supporters, of his supporters. There's so many other things to criticize them for. This isn't one of them.
I want to show the picture, too, and then I want to add one last thing about this, which is, look, as you show the picture, it's really disconcerting. I mean, look at how bad it looks, right? And I get it. They don't mean that guy even in the front of the white hair doesn't mean to put, I don't think needs to be thrusting it forward. The guy on the right's got it up. But as you look at that, especially from that angle, it looks really bad. So if you're a candidate and you see that picture and you see people complaining about it, really prominent, well-known people, don't try to get another headline out of it, right? That is just too dirty, right? it's one thing to do it once. It's another thing to do it a second time. But that leads me to my final point. I think Trump's he put his toe in. Now I think his whole body is in the dirty pool, right? And I think it's going to hurt him. I think it's one too many stories about him being racist, fascist, anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-Mexican. It goes on and on. Anti-Pope. And I think that he's I'm going to mix two metaphors. He's jumped the shark in the dirty pool, right? And so I think now you really get a sense, if you vote for Donald Trump, there's some chance you're a racist. And I think even his supporters are getting that. And it's my sense of how this story is developing from having covered politics all this time. Number two is my sense of looking at the polls and the results of the elections. Over the weekend, he was supposed to win in Maine, and he lost. He was supposed to win big in Kentucky and Louisiana, and he didn't. He barely won. And a lot of the late deciding voters, the people that voted that day, went for Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz has had now a number of surprising wins. I think he jumped the shark.
Yeah.
So I know that everybody has been waiting for this and predicting all along that he would, and I wasn't among them. I didn't say he did. I never went along with that. But today I do have that sense. There's only so much filth and racism you can do before even Republican voters go, well, I don't want my neighbors thinking I'm racist. Right?
If he does, finally, if this is what takes him out, then this is exactly what should take him out. Not a bunch of ads the RNC runs against him or something like that. It should be, because he's been doing this for a really long time with Mexicans and Muslims. Apparently didn't bother people that much. But now it's becoming so clear. If he gets taken out because he's appealing to the darkest underbelly of America, that should be why it happened. And we should go on record, by the way, Anna's one of the fairest people in the world. Look at her defending the Trump supporters.
I mean, I guess.
Take it. That's okay. Speaking of going on the record, if Cruz wins, and I think now I don't know if I'm the first person saying it, but I'll certainly be among the first. I think it's now more likely that Cruz wins than Trump wins. Okay?
That's also a disaster.
That's also, yes.
It still largely depends on what happens in Florida and Ohio. And both of those are cases where Cruz doesn't necessarily have a ton to say about what happens.
Yeah, and no. Right now, he's still crushing in those polls.
Yeah.
In those important states. So that's why...
In Ohio, Kasich down by 3 in the most recent poll I saw.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to tell me later, oh, Cenk, that was obvious. Everybody knew that at the time. Nobody knows that. He's winning by 20 points in Florida.
If he's crushing and he wins, then it doesn't count. They're weird anyway.
Right. They were likely to be pro-Trump states. Anyway, if Cruz wins, I don't see any way Trump can resist jumping into the general election. And that general election is going to be a mess. Okay? It is going to be an unbelievable ride. If you thought the primaries were crazy, wait till you see the general election.
Yeah. By the way, if Trump finally gets taken out because he's too racist, xenophobic, intolerant, they went back to Ted Cruz. So much better.
Oh, I know.
We don't want German intolerance. We want hard right Christian intolerance. Damn it.
Yeah, no, and what he has done there at the end is a horrible disservice to America, which is that he made Ted Cruz look more moderate, which previously seemed unimaginable. So by normalizing Ted Cruz, he's done a great disservice to the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to burn through to our next story, or are we taking a first break?
Story.
Okay, apparently story.
Okay, can't turn that down. Okay, third story then. This week, the Supreme Court voted unanimously to recognize a woman's rights in a same-sex adoption case. This overturned an Alabama state Supreme Court ruling that would have avoided the adoption. Now, this comes from a lesbian couple that had been together. One of the women had 3 children during the time they were together. Now, they never got married, but they did live together in one state to get the right to do the sort of joint. She's adopting since she hadn't given birth to it. And then in Alabama, they obviously have a very different view of same-sex adoption. And thankfully, the Supreme Court coming out on the right side of this. I'm going to give you some more details about the case. It was brought by VL, identities being hidden here clearly, as she is identified in court papers, against their former partner EL, who gave birth to 3 children while they were together. Now, to win adoption rights for VL, they established temporary residency in Georgia. Now, after they had split, EL agreed with the Alabama Supreme Court, which ruled in September that Georgia mistakenly granted VL joint custody. EL's lawyers argued that the Georgia court had no authority under Georgia law to award such an adoption, which is therefore void and not entitled to full faith and credit. Now, it was not necessarily the case the Supreme Court would strike down the Alabama State Supreme Court ruling, but thankfully they came out not only on the right side, but unanimously on the right side, a fairly rare case in these days of that happening. And here's a section of their ruling saying, a state may not disregard the judgment of a sister state because it disagrees with the reasoning underlying the judgment or deems it to be wrong on the merits. Rather, Alabama must give full faith and credit to the Georgia court's decision. Now, this is extremely important not just for EL and VL in this case, and not just for other people in Alabama, but right now, about 30 states grant second parent adoptions to gay and lesbian couples by law or lower court rulings. Such adoptions benefit adults who do not share a biological connection, while ensuring that children have two legal parents, particularly in case one dies or is incapacitated. And importantly, in many of those states, of those 30 states that currently do allow some form of same-sex adoption, if the Alabama State Supreme Court decision had been allowed to stand or had been upheld by the Supreme Court, that could have nullified your ability to have those adoptions in literally dozens of states across the country.
It's nice to know that these ugly custody battles happen in same-sex relationships, just like they do in heterosexual relationships, right? We're people at the end of the day.
That goes to Jimmy Dore's joke about how he thinks gay people actually voted against gay marriage. Just so they wouldn't have to get married.
Look, the Supreme Court's ruling is correct. And it's correct in terms of states' rights and making sure that states respect the rights of other states. But in this particular instance, involving this particular family, I think the Supreme Court's ruling is going to benefit the children as well, right? Because if you were with this individual and you fought to ensure that this person could adopt your biological children so they could also be a parent, it's wrong for you to try to cut that person off as soon as your relationship ends. This person has been there for your children. This person has been part of your life and your children's lives, and it should remain so. You can't just go ahead and say, oh, we broke up, so now I'm taking the kids. You're not going to have any rights.
Yeah, this issue is actually not hard at all.
Yeah.
You have to respect the other states' laws. It's a very important part of the American system. If you don't, you're going to have chaos.
Yeah.
And so, okay, Massachusetts says that. I don't care. I'm not going to listen to Massachusetts. Alabama says it. Massachusetts is not going to listen to them, right? No, that's a mess. So it's not a difficult position. And in fact, Alabama's ruling in the first place, Supreme Court, is ridiculous. They had to know that it wasn't going to stand. It might not have even stood in a deeply conservative court that it used to be when Scalia was on it. Now the Supreme Court at this point unsigned saying, no chance here. Obviously you're wrong, and we go forward. So that's why I bring that up, because conservatives sometimes just go, even if they're on the Supreme Court of a state like Alabama, makes sense, but say, I don't care what the law is. I don't care that I'm on a Supreme Court here, and I'm a judge in the United States of America. I'm not going to listen to the most obvious law there is, that we have to respect each other's laws. Because why? I don't like gay people. So I'm just not going to do it. I don't like them. And according to my Bible, not the Constitution, not our laws, but according to a document that has nothing to do with our laws. You might like that document. Some people might like the Quran, and some people might like the Bhagavad Gita. But that's not what runs the country. I don't care a bunch of court justices say. So, remind me again who the activist judges are. Oh, right, the Republican conservative justices and judges who say, I don't care what the law says, my religion trumps your law. Well, thank God today they lost on that. The Supreme Court said, yeah, of course everybody's got the same rights, and of course you have to listen to the laws of the other states. That's how this country works. Great. All right, let's take a quick break here. When we come back, the story I've been promising you all day. You're not allowed to say to Hillary Clinton, otherwise you will be sexist. And apparently some of us already have been. There's a lot of laws we have broken here on the Young Turks. So we'll explain that to you when we return. on the Young Turks. Members of the day are Tina Godshall, that's member number 745, and Dave Simmons, member number 746. Members make the show happen. Thank you guys. TYTnetwork.com/join. John used to be a member.
I was once a member. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Then I lost interest. Or started working here.
Are we still charging you? We should.
I am very irresponsible at tracking my finances. I might have been paying the last 4 years.
Okay, good. That's what I like to hear. Okay, 2 quick tweets for you guys. Brian says, people really need to learn about when the Southern Democrats moved to the Republican Party because of the Civil Rights Act. And that was part of the reason they moved. Lyndon Johnson pushed forward the Civil Rights Act, and they hated that. And they're like, okay, so let's go to the Republican Party, which is more welcoming of racists. And then, says, a bunch of white people with their hands in the air pointing to a central figure has never ended well. Okay. Quite right indeed. All right, now we move forward.
Despite nearly 100% of last night's Democratic debate being focused on policy differences between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, some in the media have chosen to latch on to a perceived instance of misogyny or sexism from Bernie Sanders. You're going to see that in this clip.
I voted to save the auto industry. He voted against the money that ended up saving the auto industry. I think that is a pretty big difference.
Well, if you were talking about the Wall Street bailout, where some of your friends destroyed this economy, excuse me, I'm talking, let him run.
If you're going to talk, tell the whole story.
Let me tell my story, you tell yours.
I will.
What was wrong with that?
I think we should drop out of the break.
It's incredible because I heard the audio of that and I was like, I don't know, maybe it's bad, but I don't think it's bad. I kind of have to see it. Now that I've seen it, she interrupts him, and he wants to get his point across. He respected you while you were speaking your piece. Let him speak his.
Earlier in the night, he was criticized for being sexist when he tried to interrupt her while she was talking. Then later, she interrupts him, and the fact that he didn't like it makes him sexist.
I can't handle it.
So there were a couple of a lot of people reacted negatively to this, either because they authentically think it's sexist or because they support Hillary Clinton and it's politically advantageous for them to imply that this guy who has a great record in organizations supporting women to imply that he is a sexist regardless. So Mike had every woman watching the Dem debate cringed when Bernie shushed Hillary this way. Really, every woman? Huh? They're a good blog overall. But saying every woman, I don't think every woman did.
I certainly didn't cringe.
No. Vox says, the moment looked bad for Sanders. He came off as a man shouting down a woman.
I can't handle
But thankfully, Vox has always been totally fair to Bernie, so they're not biased there. New York Magazine declared it arguably sexist. Well, yes, of course it's arguably sexist. Almost anything is arguably sexist. I think there are a couple important points, though, to bear in mind. So she said something that was a bit of a firebomb. He didn't support the auto bailout. If you allow that to just stand, then you're going to have problems as a candidate. So he tries to defend himself, and she immediately cuts in to stop him from defending himself. So he says, excuse me, I'm talking. First of all, he literally said, excuse me. That's known as a polite thing to say. Here are two important things. One, he treated her exactly how he would have treated if it was Martin O'Malley that was sitting over there. And we see this, by the way, every day with Donald Trump and previously with Jeb Bush. When Donald Trump interrupts Jeb Bush and Jeb Bush just meekly stops talking, we say that is a politically weak thing to do. It shows that you don't have a spine, that you can't be a leader. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he treats her like he would treat any male debate opponent. And secondly, he treated her exactly how she would treat him if he interrupted her. And by the way, and people are spreading a lot of these videos around, exactly how she treated Barack Obama. She said that exact same thing when he would interrupt her.
Okay, so these Hillary supporters that are accusing Bernie Sanders of sexism apparently have no idea how much they're setting women back, right? By treating Hillary as if she's this fragile flower who can't handle debating the same way male candidates debate with one another. Look, you get passionate about these issues. You debate with one another, and sometimes You want to talk so badly that you talk over each other or you interrupt each other. Jake and I do that all the time, right? Sometimes
Yes, that's true.
Sometimes Jake interrupts me and it comes off bad. Like some of the people on Twitter will tweet to us and tell Jake to stop interrupting me. No, Jake, when we get passionate, that's the way it goes. It's a spontaneous discussion. I don't think that there's anything sexist about that. If you tell me, hey, you know what, know your role, know your place, as a woman, you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't, if you censor me in any way, that's different. Now, in the case of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, the thing that drives me crazy about these Hillary Clinton supporters is that in their effort to smear Bernie Sanders with these sexist accusations, because obviously their candidate doesn't have policies that are good enough to support that they have to resort to dirty politics, they are minimizing actual instances of sexism. You look at cases like this, and anyone who sees this and says, that's not really sexist, is now going to look at women who point to real instances of sexism and deny that it's sexist, right? It minimizes real sexism in the world, and it drives me crazy that they're painting this disgusting picture of Bernie Sanders, especially when you look at his voting record, and especially when you see what he's done for women.
Yeah. Well, it's the boy who cried wolf, except that in the general election, the wolf is coming, right? So when you go and say, oh, Bernie Sanders, the most liberal senator, and the guy you criticize as being the most liberal senator in all of Congress is the sexist one, and you've destroyed any credibility in that argument. And when Donald Trump comes and actually does sexist things, which he almost certainly will. I mean, look at what he did to Megyn Kelly. Look at what he's done on all these women's issues. And if he does that to Hillary Clinton, meaning if they're the two candidates, then when you say he's being sexist, they're going to say, here they go again with the Hillary Clinton supporters hiding behind false charges of sexism, because that's what you did now.
Yes.
And you've ruined your own credibility. You've ruined credibility for women who are concerned about this issue, for all people who are concerned about this issue. Yeah. And look, I mean, there's so much more to say. On the substance of this issue, by the way, she said something enormously misleading about Bernie Sanders' record. So he was in favor of the $15 billion that would go to the car companies. He was against the Wall Street bailout, and she's pretending that the Wall Street bailout was just for the auto companies. Mm-hmm. And that's why now when it's his turn to answer, and she butts in and won't let him answer, he's like, well, I mean, first you lie about my record, and then you won't let me talk. He's relatively calm for those circumstances.
I have heard many times, and I accept it because it's objectively true, that Hillary Clinton is one of the most experienced politicians. She has been in the public eye for 25, 30 years at this point. She was in the White House. She ran campaigns to become senator, was a senator. She was the Secretary of State. She's been in probably something like 200 political debates in her life. If there's anyone who doesn't need to be protected or informed about how debates are supposed to go, it is Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton can defend herself. Again, this is exactly how she acted towards Barack Obama during their debates. When he would interrupt, she would stop him. It's frustrating to me because I consider myself a feminist, and there is actual sexism. When Donald Trump says, "Who could vote for Carly Fiorina?" Look at that face. That's sexism. And there are some people who support Bernie Sanders who are sexist. Bernie Sanders did not defend himself from her interrupting because he's a sexist. He again literally treated her like a man.
I'm ironically going to interrupt you here, and it's weird that I'm doing it to a guy. So I don't even like that admission that there are some Sanders supporters who are sexist.
No, because everybody has.
Hold on. No, I know. But they get you. This is the whole point of their smear, is to get people to say that. Of course it's true. There are some sexists who support every candidate, right? But when Bernie Sanders asked again today from ABC News, he says, did you check the number of times she interrupted me? Did you check how much more time Hillary Clinton had to speak than I did? Go check the record on that, right? But here it is again. ABC News puts him in a position where he has to apologize for something he didn't do. And then it forces people who support Bernie Sanders to say, well, you tell me there isn't? I mean, when she was running against Barack Obama, and she said, hey, I want to appeal to white voters who are the real voters in this country, and some people like that message. Now, are you telling me there's no racists that support Hillary Clinton? That would be a preposterous thing to say. I caught you. There are racists who support Hillary Clinton. Now, defend yourself. Defend yourself, right? I don't know. Am I being too aggressive? By the way, Bernie Sanders is Jewish. There's some people who I'm sure are anti-Semitic who support Hillary Clinton. Now, is that why they're supporting Hillary Clinton? No, that's not fair to Hillary Clinton. totally unfair to Hillary Clinton. Now go ahead and defend yourself. I mean, he's Jewish. I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you attacking the first person who could be a Jewish president of the United States? How dare you? You see how dirty it is? That's what they're doing. There is a guilty person. The people supporting Hillary Clinton. This is not a mistake. They did it to Obama. They're doing it to Bernie Sanders. They're doing it on purpose, and it's dirty pool. They're doing it to smear other people, and so it's not call it even like, hey, that's not fair to Bernie Sanders. They're doing it on purpose. There is a bad actor in this, and it is Hillary Clinton supporters.
I have to add one more thing. Okay, so as a woman, there is a lot of pressure from the Hillary camp to support Hillary, right? We've seen various clips of, public figures saying there's a special place in hell if you don't vote for women or if women don't support other women. You guys know all about that. But for me as a woman, I want nothing more than to see a woman as the president of the United States. But it has to be the right woman. It has to be the right woman with the right policies that I agree with. And more importantly, it has to be a strong woman. A woman who does not want to be treated differently from other candidates simply because she's a woman. What I get very turned off to is this idea that Hillary Clinton is this weak woman who needs to be treated very differently from every candidate. And during every debate, if Bernie Sanders has the audacity to say something even a little aggressive toward her, she has to hide behind the desk and have her supporters protect her. That is not the kind of candidate I'm in favor of. Let's focus on the policies. It doesn't speak well of your candidate if you have to resort to dirty politics in order to get her elected, okay?
Okay, now, finally, Blue Nation Review, which is a hack website that was bought specifically by Hillary Clinton supporters, a guy who runs her super PACs, to make sure that they could attack Bernie Sanders. If they couldn't get the reputable media organizations to run these stories, they just run them themselves. Actually, ironically, Daily Beast has a terrific article on that from Lloyd Grove, who's a really good journalist who happens to work there. So today, cue it up, Lloyd Grove writes about it, and today they have an article on that website attacking many people, including us. They mention a Young Turks rant, right, against Joan Walsh, and they say, and Hillary. No, first of all, we were talking about Hillary Clinton supporters who are doing this on purpose. You put Hillary in there, so you go, oh, the victim, she's the poor victim. It's so ironic. Oh my God, a woman is so defenseless. Those bad young Turks ranted against her. I don't remember you guys complaining when Anna, Jimmy, John, all of us ranted against Carly Fiorina, Ann Coulter, Laura Ingraham, Michelle Bachmann. I don't remember the articles saying we were being sexist and unfair. So, and we also ranted against Michael Tomasky, but that was never mentioned, right? Because it wants to make it seem like we only are attacking women. And then they laid out rules for things that are not allowed in attacking Hillary Clinton or criticizing Hillary Clinton. Sometimes gender bias is an online mob screaming liar with terrifying fury. We have been screaming liar about a lot of politicians. In fact, most of the politicians in this country. But now, all of a sudden, that's sexist. Calling a politician a liar is, you're an online mob.
Right.
And with terrifying fury, that poor woman, we must protect her. She's so fragile. The irony is so thick.
Yeah.
You know?
So we have to treat Hillary Clinton differently because she's a woman. Because we want equality.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I've got to give you just a couple more here. These are more things that are sexist. Sometimes it's accusing Hillary of being corrupt without an iota of evidence. First of all, there is overwhelming evidence. Yeah. So now you call a politician corrupt. Sexist! Sexist! I mean, you can call male politicians corrupt. You just can't call, you can call female Republican politicians corrupt too. You just can't call Democratic politicians who are females who pay us to support her corrupt, because then that's sexist. Oh, I see. Thank you for clarifying those rules. Sometimes it's media outlets using the most unflattering photos of Hillary imaginable. Okay. We haven't done that, but
I think Bernie's actually got a zit in that picture.
Okay, now, you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to panic you, like, oh my God, what picture am I going to use? I gotta do kids gloves on Hillary Clinton, otherwise it's going to be sexist, I'm so scared. Don't buy into this crap. That's all it is. By the way, this is all a guy writing, pretending to stick up for women.
Really fast, they also, you skipped it. They had the witch Hillary hashtag was taken over by people who wanted to use the other meaning of the word witch. That's not what the witch Hillary hashtag was about at all. The witch Hillary thing, which by the way ended up being censored by Twitter, was simply showing here's one thing that Hillary said recently, which sounds good. Oh shit, here's her saying the exact opposite thing 3 or 5 or 10 years ago. Or here's her voting the other way, and now she sounds good. So which Hillary is it that we're going to get? Oh, no, because somebody tweeted to that guy once calling her a witch. That's all that it was. It wasn't, a whole bunch of people pointing out her hypocrisy.
So, look, I can go on and on. There's a list of all the different things you're not allowed to do. And I get it. You get it. And even if you're a Hillary Clinton supporter, I think most of you guys get it. This is an effort by her campaign. It's the guy who bought the site is the one who runs her super PAC. It's an effort by the campaign to say, shut your mouth. You're not allowed to criticize Hillary Clinton under almost any circumstance. And by the way, I don't care if you're a guy, and I don't care if you're a woman, okay? It doesn't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter what your gender is. You're not allowed to criticize Hillary Clinton. So they're also telling women who support Bernie Sanders, shut your mouth, right? Again, another layer of irony here. And what are you guys? You're Bernie bros. You're Bernie bros, right? Well, accusing women, and they literally did that. The first article to come out about Bernie bros, the first quote was from a woman. Okay, so they accuse women of being bros. Seems like that might be under a list of things that are banned if you're sexist.
Yeah, can you imagine if we called Hillary a bro?
Can you imagine we called Hillary any name related to women? Any name.
Yeah. If he wins the primary and she supports him, he's a bro.
And last point on that. All these guys think they're so clever. Oh, we'll be dirty and we'll undermine Bernie Sanders. We'll, pretend that he's sexist and his supporters are sexist, etc. And then if you are lucky enough to win, then you're going to go and ask those same people that you played these kind of dirty politics against. Oh, come join us. We're wonderful progressives. You got to support us. Yeah. Come on in. And good luck with that. I know. And then you'll yell at them and say, oh, you're supporting Donald Trump. How dare you? You're just like Donald Trump. I know all your tricks. Right? So it is a terrible strategy for the Democratic Party to purposely alienate an enormous chunk of the Democratic voters just because you were desperate to win. Am I allowed to say that? Okay. Let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, some news also involving politics, but some lighter fare as well. Come right back.
John and Hannah here.
And here's a brief look at what Think Tank's all about. Woo, 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 woo. I'm smiling. Oh my god, I'm so proud. Can a robot dance like this?
Wow.
This is a joy with a fish company. Okay. Sorry guys, go ahead. This is the last Think Tank video. I'm just gonna go now.
Yeah, no, I need help.
The one thing that really appeals to people in the online audience is authenticity and sincerity.
Okay, we agree to disagree.
So of course you get the negative feedback that isn't constructive at all, and I dislike those people.
Hannah looks inbred. That's really difficult for my self-esteem.
You need to lift weights. Fuck you.
Hey, let's keep moving. Am I wrong?
Once I was bit by a monkey. I can't say
No big fan.
well, then. Whoa!
I used to be very socially awkward, but look at me now. Okay. That could look more like a vagina. Oh my god, my never clear. You want to stab?
I want to stab. So what really turns women on?
Anyone want to think of a weird way to fuck? This dress is blue and black.
Well, I disrespectfully.
She is one of the 100 finalists for the Mars One project. I don't know what that means.
Why do you cringe every time you look at a photo of yourself?
Because I'm often masturbating in photos of myself. 2 photos of myself.
Love. Also, masturbation totally counts as sex for you, so do it.
Why do you make me this weird alien?
Whoever has haughty eyes and a proud heart, I will not tolerate.
You guys tell me, hottie or not?
Tune in tomorrow for all new videos with me and with Hannah and with Think Tank. Have a good night.
Alright, back on AM Tricks, by the way, over the weekend, Think Tank just crossed 1 million subscribers.
Not a big deal.
Okay.
I would ask you to subscribe. The chances are you are. But if you don't, please do.
Look at get a load of this guy already. Alright,
Hopefully you can tell he's acting.
YouTube.com/Think Tank. By the way, for a lot of our political coverage, if you don't catch it from the beginning, obviously one way you can watch all of it is if you're a member, TYTnetwork.com/join. Another way is sometimes we put extra clips up of our coverage on TYT Politics. So that's youtube.com/TYT Politics. Check that out. All right, what's next, Dan?
All right. Update on a story we did last week that infuriated me, but we have somewhat of a good news update. A high school teacher was forced to resign after a 16-year-old student of hers went through her phone while she was monitoring the halls, found some semi-nude pictures of her, and then sent it out to his peers. Now, she was forced to resign, even though the 16-year-old student was the one who violated her privacy. Well, the update to the story is that now he's going to face some charges for what he did. Now, let me give you some more details in what he did and how malicious he was. The student, whose name has not been released to the press, distributed the photos at school, also printing out copies with threatening messages on the back and leaving them in the teacher's mailbox at home for her husband to find. That's how malicious this kid was, right? Well, police have just announced that the student had been arrested and charged with Computer Crimes Act, or with the Computer Crimes Act, and aggravated voyeurism, 2 charges frequently pieced together in lieu of existing revenge porn laws when someone hacks personal electronics to distribute nude or sexualized photos of a victim. Now, why is it that she was forced to resign? Well, apparently the superintendent believed that she contributed to the delinquency of a minor because she didn't lock her phone. Okay. But the police looked into this matter further, and they found out that her semi-nude photos were actually password protected on her phone. And so what he did was essentially hack into her phone, get access to these pictures, and send it to his friends.
So I don't love arresting students. Suspension, expulsion is a big penalty for someone. In this case, he was particularly malicious. I mean, he figured out a way to hack her passcode. He sent the pictures to her husband. It turns out she'd taken them for her husband anyway. So that turned out to be not as damaging as he suspected. But I don't care so much about how he's punished as I care about making sure she isn't punished. So they immediately dismissed her, which is unbelievable. So then they started an online petition. They want to get 1,000 signatures to make sure that she can get reinstated. It was her students that did this. Instead of 1,000 signatures, they got 12,526. And the superintendent of the school said it was insignificant.
Irrelevant.
Yes. And so it's neither one of those things. She didn't do anything wrong. It was pictures for her husband. It was on her private phone. It was password protected. She did absolutely nothing wrong. And if they don't rehire her, it's an outrage, and some other school district would be lucky to have her and should hire her instead.
So the fact that she was originally got in trouble because she hadn't locked her phone, which made it too easy for him to be corrupted by her semi-nude pictures by itself would be ridiculous. Mm-hmm. The idea that if I just leave my phone here, then I'm just forcing you to look at the disgusting photos I've taken. That's ridiculous. But then they get rid of her. Then they find out that she had actually tried to make the photos impossible to view, and he hacked into them. Him saying the insignificant thing, he needs to be fired. Because clearly he has some other reason that he's not stating for getting rid of her. If they were naked photos, if they were videos of her having sex, she still shouldn't have lost her job. Semi-nude photos that she password protected for her husband? This guy doesn't have the judgment to lead a school.
And remember, he's a superintendent, okay? He's part of the administration, and I think leadership matters a lot when it comes to schools and the types of lessons that these schools teach these kids. Now remember, this 16-year-old isn't facing punishment from the school, he's facing punishment from the justice system. But the message that these administrators are sending right now to all of these students is, if you see a phone sitting there, you have every right to just look through it. There are no consequences for that, right? In fact, if you find something incriminating in that phone, well then the person who has that phone, or the phone that belongs to that person should face the consequences for their actions. You're okay.
It's the scavenger hunt precedent.
It's crazy.
One final thought. That's her private property. Imagine if it was a different form of property, her house.
Yep.
And the guy breaks into her house, steals her pictures, and then sends it around school, and then you fire her. He broke into my private property and stole my stuff. Why are you firing me? I'm not allowed to have things on my private person that isn't, that students shouldn't be privy to. That makes no sense, right? And just because your phone is portable and is carried with you, doesn't mean that people are allowed to break into it.
Oh, and by the way, if this is the precedent now that if you have naughty stuff on your phone, you should lose your job, let's check his phone. Because he could leave it out any second, and I feel like I have to look at the phone. I might become delinquent. Let's check all the teachers at that school who think that she should be fired.
No,
how much dirty smut they've got on their smartphone.
It's a great point by John. If you're sitting in a room with him, you should just snatch his phone. And if he complains, go, no, this is insignificant. And just hack into it and find out what's in it, and then spread it around to everybody and go, no, it's okay. It's insignificant.
Privacy is so important. I don't go through my fiance's phone. My fiance's phone's like sitting right there in front of me. I'm not even tempted by it, right?
You're too trusting. I've gone through his phone.
All right, let's move on to some other news today. The Supreme Court is currently deciding on a case involving abortion restrictions in the state of Texas. So many critics are wondering why it is that moderators in these presidential debates are not asking questions about reproductive rights, which is an interesting criticism. The Fox News town hall that just took place with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton was the first event that finally asked about their stance on reproductive rights. However, is this an interesting enough, or is this, are there enough differences between the two candidates to bring this up and start a debate? Okay, and the answer is no. All right. I think it's an interesting topic. I think it should be discussed to some level, but I think what the debate moderators want to focus on, and maybe I'm giving them too much credit, is the differences between the two candidates. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton are exactly the same in terms of their voting records when it comes to reproductive rights. Exactly the same. There's only one minor difference between them, and I'll tell you what it is in just a second, but I want you guys to jump in first.
And small note here, maybe it's a large note. The organization running this article is the one run by the same guy who runs Hillary Clinton's super PAC. So there's some chance that they're putting this out there in the press so that Hillary Clinton can get asked in the debates and claim to be more for women's rights. So they might view that as an advantage for her. It doesn't really matter if their records are identical. She gets to say, I'm a woman, so you should support me. This is the same person and the same organization that has been accusing every one of her critics of being sexist. So it might be just another one of those dirty tricks to just talk about it. Now, on the other hand, abortion is a perfectly good thing that people should ask about, and there's nothing wrong with, right, we wouldn't do it in reverse. Like if you ask about abortion in debate, oh my God, that's so sexist against Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. Right? No, there's some they should ask. But Anna, I mean, she's done more research on the topic. My understanding was that their positions are incredibly similar.
Very. I mean, in terms of the way they voted, there are no differences. Bernie Sanders got a 100% score from NARAL. He has voted consistently on granting women reproductive rights. He has voted consistently on expanding stem cell research. He is very consistent when it comes to women.
I think that your read of why Media Matters might be talking about that could be true. I think that they would be. Real quick about his record, because he has that record. But also, I would say, as much as obviously it's awesome that they both voted that way, and it was great of you to find all that out, because I didn't know for sure. I sort of looked over all the issues together. Their voting in the past on these sorts of things is certainly an indication of how they would actually rule as presidents. But there's a lot of stuff that's developed in the past couple of years that in terms of how they would choose a Supreme Court justice based on Texas's recent legislation. I think that there are a number of things that people would like to know where their stand is.
Yeah.
I think it's more important that they ask about abortion in a general election debate, because then there's incredible differences, and people should know those differences. And I agree with you, John. I think accidentally it might have backfired on them. If you watch tonight's debate, the first time that it got asked, again, ironically by Fox News, and Bernie Sanders was asked about late-term abortions, Hillary Clinton was asked the same question. Hillary Clinton, go back and watch the tape, hemmed and hawed on late-term abortion.
Yes.
Like a little bit of this, but kind of that, and yeah. And Bernie Sanders was like, I'm pro-choice. Okay, yes. Period. So it seemed like he had the more definitive and better answer, but again, to be fair to Hillary Clinton, her record's perfectly good.
Her record is perfectly good, and I want to give you that, very clear statement before I get into the minor differences between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. There's a reason why she hemmed and hawed, right? That wasn't a mistake. The way that Hillary Clinton frames issues involving reproductive rights is meant to draw in some moderate Republican voters, right? She purposely frames things from a centrist perspective, and part of it is because she wants to close that gap. She wants some compromise. She wants some agreement. But at the same time, she is not as progressive as Bernie Sanders is. For Bernie Sanders, he doesn't care so much about reaching out to Republicans and finding compromise on this issue. He believes that reproductive rights should be granted to women. He doesn't believe that there are any ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? So he doesn't hold back. He's like, yeah, I'm in favor of allowing women to choose. Whereas Hillary Clinton uses this phrase quite a bit when talking about abortion. She talks about how she wants to make sure it's safe, legal, and she emphasizes rare, right? So when it comes to working with Republicans on abortion, usually what she does is she tries to emphasize, all right, well, I'm going to try to make adoption a lot easier. I'm going to do everything I can to make abortion as rare as possible. I believe that abortion should be allowed. I believe it should be legal. I'm pro-choice. But let me find ways to come at this from a centrist perspective. And that's really the difference between the two of them.
You're actually swaying me a little bit. I get why she does that.
Yeah.
And I'm not outraged by it or anything, but it is shaming a little bit for people who have had abortions. Like, we need it to be really rare. Mm-hmm. There's good reasons why it should be rare, but it also does put the onus on people who've had abortion, like, you shouldn't have done it. That's why the less that it happens, the better. Just a twinge of that.
No, I totally agree with you on that. And it's not anything to be angry at her about. I don't even necessarily think that's her intention, but it does come off that way.
I think that it's one of the reasons you haven't seen questions about it is, one, perhaps thinking that there wouldn't be much of a difference, although there's a lot of things that they are similar on. You still ask the questions. But that it could also be that the moderators, like a lot of people, feel like it's not something that should be talked about.
Yeah.
And that is, to some extent, by omission, that is shaming people who have done it, or shaming people who believe that it should be accessible.
And it's part of the conventional wisdom in Washington. For example, in conventional wisdom in Washington, they never ask Republicans, how are you going to pay for your wars? When Democrats say, hey, we'd like education for kids, they say, how are you going to pay for it? We'd like Social Security for seniors. How are you going to pay for it? Wars, no questions about that. But finally, on the issue of framing, again, Bernie Sanders had, I thought, the best line of the night tonight in there, and on this question, when he said, "Isn't it funny that Republicans who claim that they're against big government are in favor of government so large they'd like to get into your private life, right, and make decisions for you on what you should do with your body?" So on the one side, you've got framing saying that abortion should be rare, and in some cases yes, some cases no. On the other side, you have, I'm pro-choice, and if you're for abortions, you're for big government, and just admit it. I'll take that frame any day.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk about Caitlyn Jenner and how unbearable she is. The season premiere of season 2 of I Am Kate just aired, and Caitlyn Jenner has some very strong criticisms for Hillary Clinton and how she believes that she would not do enough for the trans community. So let me give you some of the quotes, and keep in mind that the context of this discussion is on a bus. She's with her trans friends. They're discussing politics, and one of them is challenging Caitlyn on the fact that she's a Republican. And here's what Caitlyn Jenner has to say about it. "It's the last place I want to be, but I'm open. We need both sides, and if we're unfortunate enough to get Hillary as our next president, we need her on our side, although she won't be. She couldn't care less about women," which is an incredible criticism considering the fact that right now, on the Democratic side, all the criticism toward Bernie is framed with, he's not as successful in getting things done for women as Hillary is. Anyway, here's another thing Caitlyn Jenner said about Hillary. She cares about herself, which is kind of interesting.
Okay. So, this is outrageous on both sides.
Yeah.
It's crazy to say Bernie Sanders is sexist or his supporters are sexist, and that's what motivates them to be for the most liberal senator in the country.
Yeah.
For positives. On the other hand, it's insane to say Hillary Clinton doesn't care about women. Okay, if you say she cares about herself, yes. She's a politician, that's what most people care about if they're politicians. That's what most people care about, period, right? But politicians are particularly self-centered. But the whole idea that Hillary Clinton's going to be bad for women coming from Caitlyn Jenner, who thinks that Ted Cruz is the best candidate.
Oh, you think Ted Cruz cares about you? No, but that's the thing. I think that she's so misinformed about these issues that she might actually think that Ted Cruz will look out for her in the end.
Well, trans people are people. Trans people can be really unwise about politics.
Yeah, and look, she's unwise about politics, but she also comes from the perspective of a privileged white guy who has now transitioned into a woman, right? And she does not know what it's like for the vast majority of transgender people, coping with these politicians that don't want to give them rights, that talk about them as if they're animals trying to sneak into the wrong bathroom, which Ted Cruz has done.
Trying to get a job, trying to rent an apartment.
Right.
Those are things that when for decades you've been rich and well-connected, you haven't had to deal with directly. Doesn't mean you haven't spoken to people about it, but you haven't lived that life.
It's unlikely that Caitlyn Jenner is going to have issues with housing.
Yeah.
Right. So let me give you a little more. Also understand that Caitlyn Jenner is fabulously wealthy and she wants to protect her wealth, right? And so I think that's what the appeal of the Republican Party is for her. Also, she is religious, which is crazy. But anyway, here's another thing she said. We're $18.5 trillion in debt. I think what they don't realize is this country could collapse over this at some point. And if our country collapses, it doesn't make any difference if you're gay, trans, or whatever. So she thinks that Republicans would be better with this debt that we have, which is hilarious. And then also she says, Republicans and the conservatives are not these horrible people out there trying to oppress people. I don't feel like they're out to get us. Every conservative guy out there believes in everybody's rights, which is why they didn't want same-sex couples to get married and, things like that.
Yeah, and are you going to talk about the Houston stuff?
Go ahead. No, you can.
So she was presented with evidence that it was conservative groups and Republican politicians who stopped with the Houston law protecting gay and transgender LGBT individuals from discrimination, refused to accept it. Said, I can't say if the governor of Texas is a Republican or a Democrat. You don't have to. He's a Republican. It doesn't matter what you think. Was given a newspaper. No, this shows that the group is against. Nope, I refuse to accept that. And I was wondering, so I don't, the Daily Caller, I don't read the Daily Caller. They're conservative organization, right?
That was the first article. That's from the day.
Yeah, so we have a couple of articles talking about this story. So conservatives, every conservative just wants everybody to have rights, according to Caitlyn Jenner. But I noticed this. After Jenner's friends criticized him for his conservative views, he said Republicans just had to. Yep. Yeah. Only the conservative organization writing about your thing insisted on using the he/him pronouns. But they just want everybody to have rights. They don't have anything against LGBT individuals.
Look, for most of her life, internally, she identified as a woman. That's what she tells us, and that's obviously what she acted based on, so I completely believe her on that. But the outside world didn't know that. So they reacted to her based on her outward appearance, which was rich, white, male Republican. So all these Republicans were great to her because they didn't know she was a her. they thought, oh, a star athlete, Republican, might donate to my campaign, and they were terrific to you. So she says, well, I don't know, all the Republicans I know are lovely. Yeah, that was back then, right? And so now, and she's still famous, so I don't think anybody comes and spits in her face. If they're a Republican politician, they probably still want her money, right? But denying the reality that Republican politicians all over the country are trying to take away your rights is, well, literally ignorant. So if I guess she's proud of her ignorance, we'll find out in the show, though I won't, because I won't watch it, if this bus ride full of, across the country with other trans folks turns her a little bit more reasonable and gets her to understand what they've had to go through their whole lives. But she's a Jenner / Kardashian, so I wouldn't count on it. More likely that she'll remain clueless in her world where, fabulously wealthy people think that the main thing that matters is tax cuts.
Yeah, well, they'd have to undo decades of conservative Republican programming.
Yep. Okay, I think we're out of time. So we are going to have a brief post game for you guys, nothing but fun for the members. So that's tytnetwork.com/join. There's been a lot of controversy. We'll talk about some of that when we return for the members.